Basalt Planning and Zoning Commission meeting Tuesday, May 17th. We have a call to order, please.
Bill Marin.
Yo.
Kyle Oberketter.
Here.
Gino Rossetti.
Here.
Eric Bosick.
Here.
Rob Levitt.
Yes.
Cindy Hirschfield. Here.
Great, we've got a quorum. Next order is approval of minutes from April 19th. Do you have any comments, concerns? If not, a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Rob, second
I'll
from
second.
Gino. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. The next order of business is a public hearing and introductory meeting, on the BCC final plan application. Give it to staff and the applicants.
Let me share my screen here, just a quick second. The applicants get settled. Okay, thanks. We do have the applicant group here this evening. We've got Tim Belinsky and Andrew Light. We also have Scott McHale from Group Architects and Heather Henry from C1 Connect One Design. And we've got back here Colter and Seth from the group. So this is a public hearing, consideration of an application submitted for final CSC site plan review, rezoning to the CSC zone district, and code amendments to the CSC zone district and associated reviews that is submitted by BCC LLC. And it's to demolish the existing building at 140 Basalt Center Circle and construct a new mixed-use building with a 9,000 square foot grocery store with a liquor store included in it and 67 apartments on the upper 2 floors of the building. The sketch plan was approved pursuant to Resolution 38, Series of 2021. The subject site is known as the Basalt Center Circle Parcel, or BCC property for short. It includes a vacant commercial space that previously housed Clark's Market and Habitat Restore. And it also includes the commercial spaces that currently house Jimbo's Liquor, BLT, and Decorative Materials. Contains a parking lot that is commonly owned and maintained by the Owners Association. So it's not in the applicant's ownership in terms of the parking lot. The proposal, as noted, is to remove the existing building and construct a new building, as you see here on the screen, of 9,000 square foot grocery on the first floor, and then 67 apartment units on the upper floor, as well as an at-grade parking structure with 58 parking spaces that you can see just to the east there. You can see it on the screen. This is the 58 parking spaces in the parking structure. The applicants also proposed to reconfigure the existing parking lot, that's a common parking lot, to create a patio area out front of the grocery store that would include outdoor seating and other activities. It's also proposed to improve the pedestrian access through the parking lot, as you can see by multiple crosswalks and accesses that we'll get into here as part of the presentation. The site is currently zoned C2 and is proposed to be rezoned to the commercial community serving commercial zone district, which is the CSC zone district. In terms of the review process, the actions being requested include rezoning to the CSC zone district, CSC final plan review. The CSC zone district has a sketch plan and a final plan review, and so the sketch was previously approved. Code amendments as well to the CSC zone district to remove the requirement to provide a pedestrian connection to the river as well as to Midland Avenue. as the applicants don't control or own the property adjacent to Midland Avenue, as well as adjacent to the river. And we'll have more discussion on that here as part of the presentation. The actions would require a P&Z recommendation to the town council on the final plan application. So this evening, as Eric indicated, staff recommends treating this meeting as an introduction meeting to the final plan application, as well as discussion items, by hearing a presentation from staff as well as the applicants, and then taking public comments because it is a publicly noticed public hearing. And then subsequently, the P&Z could provide initial comments and identify additional information that might be needed at a future meeting to make a recommendation to council. In terms of the, screen's frozen here. There we go. In terms of the discussion items that are included in your packet, we have consistency with the master plan. The property is one of the primary properties identified in the 2020 master plan. And it was provided a density range of between 52 and 134 units in the master plan. There were several redevelopment scenarios that were identified in the master plan, and this proposal is most consistent with the retail anchor scenario that was in the master plan, as it generally stays within the footprint of the existing building and has a retail anchor. So this is the page out of the master plan that has the retail anchor scenario that was provided. The redevelopment of this property was one of the 13 top projects that were listed in the survey from residents that was part of the master plan. You see it included here. And additionally, staff has outlined the consistency with the specific goals in your staff memo that you have in your packet. In terms of consistency with the CSC zone district requirements, staff has reviewed the project in terms of its consistency with CSC zone district, believes that it's consistent with the exception that they cannot provide the pedestrian connections to the river and Midland Avenue, as are shown in the diagram that you have in your packet. The applicant had conversations with the property owners of Alpine Bank and Tempranillo to try to obtain access, pedestrian access to Midland Avenue through that corridor. And those property owners were not interested at this time in having pedestrian access through their property. Staff was part of some of those conversations as well. And then also the applicant had conversations about the potential to have public access through the property adjacent to the river, as is required by the CSC zone district, and the property owner also was not interested in allowing that. So that being the case, they've requested code amendments to change the CSC zone district to not require those two access points. In terms of other discussion items, the grocery composition was a significant discussion item at the sketch plan level, in that there is a definition that sets parameters for the grocery. At sketch plan, staff and the applicants worked with Don Elliott of Clarion and Associates to come up with a definition that develops these basic parameters of a grocery. And we have the definition in your packet. The definition requires that at least 70% of the retail space be primary goods, and that 30% or less be for secondary goods like alcohol and pharmaceuticals. At the sketch plan level, many of the P&Z and council desired some flexibility in the definition for it to potentially act as more of kind of a European market type scenario. And staff believes that we've built that into the proposed definition that you have in your packet. Other discussion items include the affordable and community housing provisions and proposal as part of the plan. The applicants originally proposed 15% of the units to be deed restricted, along with providing a 1.5% real estate transfer assessment as part of the sketch plan proposal. But during the sketch plan review, the applicants increased that to 25% of the units being deed restricted, as well as maintained the 1.5% RETA that was part of the proposal. So this equals 17 deed restricted units that are proposed. The applicants also offered at the sketch plan level that 60% of the units will be for tenants that occupy them as their primary residence, as was outlined in your packet. In addition, they proposed that 100% of the units will have at least 6-month minimum lease terms to them. The Basalt Affordable Community Housing Committee, BAC, is in the process of reviewing the final plan application and should have a recommendation for the P&Z prior to your next meeting on the topic. BAC was scheduled to review it before the P&Z's initial meeting, but didn't have a quorum at their last meeting. At the sketch plan level, BAC was supportive of the mix of units, as it had a majority of studios, and the town has no studios in our current inventory of affordable housing. Other topics include the architecture and typologies. The applicants can better present the architecture as part of their comments, but the CSC zone district requires the upper floor setback. And to clarify, during the sketch plan review, the applicants changed from 4 stories to 3 as part of the review. And so they have the upper floor stepped back from the 2 Rivers Road facade of the building, as is required by the CSC zone district. Additionally, the CSC zone district contains requirements for simple building forms, as is required by the R-Town Vitality Zone, and staff believes that they have achieved that with their proposed architecture. In terms of access and parking, which is another discussion item, the applicants had to reconfigure their access slightly and adjust some pieces of the parking from sketch plan. They're proposing to reconfigure the access in the parking lot to one-way on the south side of the building, as can be seen here. As I noted, they had to reconfigure the parking slightly due to turning radius studies and requirements by the fire district. So they lost 3 parking spaces from the sketch plan to the final plan, and they slightly adjusted the size of the patio, but they can speak to that a little bit more. They still have 134 parking spaces in the project. They have 58 that are proposed in the residential structure here, and those are for the residential use. And then they have a total of 76 in the common parking lot, 16 of which are proposed for use of the residential component. This exceeds the 93 total that would be required by the CSC zone district. In terms of other topics, the pedestrian access and the Parks, Open Space and Trails Committee review included increased pedestrian connections. It includes now a ramp up to 2 Rivers Road from the parking lot. It also was a suggestion of post at the sketch plan level that the applicants consider doing raised crosswalks throughout the common parking lot. The applicant looked into it and also discussed it with the HOA. The HOA ultimately didn't permit raised crosswalks. However, the applicants have proposed a colored concrete crosswalk, as you can see in several different locations. The post committee reviewed that as part of the final plan review and felt that that was acceptable. The Post Committee overall was supportive of the connections that they have proposed. It includes some additional crosswalks that the applicant will go over, but it has a crosswalk over to the stairs area that go up to Two Rivers. It also includes a new crosswalk over to the area by the Tipsy Trout and that area. In terms of ADA accessibility, which was another discussion item, as was noted in the application, there is accessibility route that comes from the corner of Midland Avenue and Two Rivers Road across to the front of the grocery store. And there's also elevators that are included in the building. The loading area, as was noted in your staff memo, was studied further between the sketch and sketch and final plan. And the applicant still includes the loading area adjacent to the building between it and the gas station, as you can see here. But they did do more studies in terms of how trucks can access that area, so there was a slight adjustment to the patio area. Post was supportive of the reconfiguration and was accepting. Post and P&Z at the sketch plan level was interested in having the ADA parking spaces adjacent to the patio, so they wouldn't be as full all the time and block the access to the patio. Other topics included in the discussion items included green building and green infrastructure. The applicants will be required to meet the sustainable building regulations, and they propose for the residential to be electric. They've also provided electric car charging stations and e-bike charging that they can go over as part of their discussion. In terms of technical aspects, the fire district is still working with the applicants a little bit on the turning radius in a couple spots to adjust it, and should have a better understanding of that prior to the second P&Z meeting and have some adjustments. In terms of the sanitary sewer line capacity, the Sand District has been studying the capacity of their sewer lines. They're trying to determine whether they have issues with infiltration of groundwater into their sewer lines, or whether they're having a capacity issue with their sewer lines. So that study should be, at least have initial data back in July, according to the engineers. So we should have an understanding of whether there's a capacity issue before the council does their final plan review. And then finally, WeCycle. WeCycle has provided a letter that's in your packet for consideration. It recommends an expansion of the current WeCycle station, which is located on the corner of Midland Avenue and Two Rivers in the Cobble area adjacent to Two Rivers Road. They've recommended moving that expanded station back to the patio area. Staff and the applicants have kind of looked at that and believe that it would kind of take over the patio area, and don't believe it's a great use to put right in the patio area. So staff is suggesting that staff will work with WeCycle to see if they can maintain the existing station where it's located, and then maybe come up with a site for another second station to kind of help meet their demands in that scenario. And then finally, last discussion item includes the timing of the grocery store. The proposed application includes that the commercial core and shell would retain CO at the same time that the residential units would get a CO, but that the tenant finish on the grocery store would come shortly after the CO of the core and shell, as well as the residential units. But the applicant would need to show proof of having a grocery store tenant by the time of the residential CO, and that they would need to put up security so that tenant finish happens on the grocery store. So that's a discussion item for consideration. Staff anticipates coming back with draft conditions at the second P&Z meeting for P&Z to review. So this evening, staff would recommend hearing additional conversation from the applicants, taking public comment, and just providing initial discussion by the P&Z. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and turn it over to the applicants. I'll cue yours up. Which presentation do you want first, Scott, or?
Do you want to do the PowerPoint, just the 4 slides? Thank you all for being here. We appreciate the time and the review, and welcome, Michelle, to your new job.
Thank you.
You were part of this last time. James did a great job summarizing the project now, and I think what I wanted to spend my time briefly doing is just explaining, you all last viewed this, I guess, about a year ago, what's happened since you all last saw it and how did it get to where it is now. And the cliff notes of that are really that we went through, you got approved at Planning Commission, went through council, and that was during the fall. I think we had 4 meetings. And in the process of the feedback, the biggest move we made is we decided we'd take a story off the building and try to make the building more tight to the property lines, and so it went from 4 stories to 3 stories, and that was a direct response to a lot of people being sensitive to height in downtown Basalt. We also obviously had a big conversation, as we did here, about affordable housing, and we agreed to deed restrict from 15 up to 25% of rent-capped affordable housing. And that conversation carried on to a very big paranoia, as is typical in this valley nowadays, about short-term rentals. So we believe we've designed this where that's not our target market. So we've got 60% will be primary residence, and then we'll also have a 6-month minimum lease term to prevent that. We also, with the change, I think one of the things I'll have Scott walk through is the design. We have 1 entrance to the grade parking, and we thought it was important to simplify the circulation in the building and to maximize the parking in there. That was another feedback from council. So they were very much, parking's obviously a concern downtown, so we thought it was important to keep as many spaces as we could. So we have tandem parking there, and we've tried to keep the parking issue clear. I think that we explained this last time. What hasn't changed is the building now still provides a lot more parking than the current use of the existing commercial, as the parking generation codes count for commercial. So we think this project will actually, by adding 58 spaces in the footprint, will actually take pressure off the existing parking count for the building. We did a little more research going from sketch to final on turning radiuses for the loading trucks. So we lost a little bit of size on the patio out front, but we still think it's very functional, and we're very excited about that part. We think that's going to be a very good, very nice community gathering place. The intent of that is still there. And our goal with the grocery remains a activated grocery store. This will be a place that you come to shop, but you also come to linger. And we think we've done a lot of homework, talked to a lot of people, both in Denver and locals in the valley as well, about what do people want. You hear so much now about Aspen. There's just not a fun place to go anymore. And I mean, we think that's such a big deal of losing all the fun places. And we think this could be a really, really fun place for people to come. And we think the outdoor space really is suited for that. So that would be our goal, is have an activated grocery store where people come, they can shop, but they can also eat, and it would be a great experience. I think that's really, I'll let Scott walk through the architecture. We have met with the HOA again. We've gotten the HOA support on this. We got a unanimous vote at Post. As James mentioned, we did meet with all our neighbors specifically about the access point behind, so we brought them up to speed in our project. Gonzo, I don't know if he's here, but he's owns the liquor store, and he's, very excited to remain part of the project. We actually are working on a temporary space for him for his liquor license to remain. One of the things he has to do to maintain his liquor license is to have a temporary spot during construction, so we're working through the logistics of that, which I think people are supportive of keeping him in business. But he's been great to work with. So I'll I know that one of the other topics was architectural character when we were with you all last time, so I'll let Scott speak to that. And Heather's here and she can fill in any gaps as needed. But they've done, in our opinion, a great job, and I think you'll find the building is significantly improved from the last time you saw it, so I'll hand it off.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Scott McHale with Z Group Architects and Heather Henry. So with Connect One, we'll kind of bounce back and forth. But we're not going to represent everything about the project because you've seen it. We've evolved it pretty drastically since you last saw it. We think it's made great strides, and we appreciate the collaborative process of working with council, the townspeople, our friends, and with you guys. So thanks for all the comments. I think it's become a really great project. It was before, and it's just getting better. So we'll kind of run through these. Next slide, please, James. These are just quick recaps of. This slide is just to kind of get the visuals going in our minds when we see the drawings and the plans. So the outdoor spaces, trying to bring color and artistic nature to the landscape and the gathering spaces. We want to create those community gathering spaces, as we feel that all of our projects now that have housing and commercial components need that now. It's about the experience rather than just the product alone. That's a huge part of architecture and design today. Railroad inspiration that we have, part of that blends into the landscape, and then parking and parking pockets. So it's not just seas of asphalt. We have to break those up as much as we can. Next slide, please. We talked about architectural character. Again, just the big points we're hitting on is we really want to blend that historic western mountain town character that we see in Basalt. So that has that Main Street USA feel, 2 to 3 stories tall, brick, wood, glass, Victorian proportions, mixing it with the historic Western Railroad heritage that's so prevalent in downtown Basalt. We have the Basalt Y, which was important historically. So we're trying to embrace some of that character of the railroad architecture and details, exposed structure, trestle bridges, and some of that, a little bit of an industrial flair, and some of those materials. Mixed in with a bit of that, rather than historic Western mountain town, it's more of a Rocky Mountain, Western mountain flair. I think, Bill, you touched on that a bit last time. We talked about getting a little bit more of the Western mountain feel to it, rather than, I think some comments were it was a little too sleek, industrial, things like that. So we kind of heard everybody, we talked about it, and made some pretty big changes three-dimensionally to the project, as you'll see it on the coming slides. Next slide, please. I'll let Heather touch on this, so the quick site plan with some revisions.
So I guess, yeah, and there are some people on there, so whatever I point to, just circle it. So we have a couple of blow-up slides for some of the changes to the plaza, both plazas, the more public and then the public and private space here. So I'm going to talk about what's happened and some of the changes more on the edges. So we really beefed up even more of the pedestrian connections throughout the parking area. Some based upon feedback from Post, you all, council, some from a technical perspective, so having a deeper dive with service access, deeper dive with fire, et cetera, and our traffic study. So one of the changes here, we'll reorganize this corner slightly, and then basically this has been pulled out actually closer to Midland Avenue, so you really want your crosswalk right as someone is turning in. You don't want to bring that further in, kind of where it is now. So we've done that. And then this connection here changed just a little bit once we kind of reorganized that. This has then come across. We're still meeting right with the ADA, essentially, striping. So there'll always be this sort of safe zone where you would go in between any folks that are parked in the ADA spots. This is still our loading zone, as I mentioned, and again, we have a blow up. So we really, again, did a deep dive into our service area here and the loading zone. So essentially loading and unloading. Tried to really rethink how trucks might get into there, and it turns out really their turning movement is into the property and then back into this area and then drive back out. And so we had to, we still get to get rid of a big chunk of the kind of sea of asphalt that's out here now, but we did have to pull the plaza back just a little bit. As mentioned, we have the ramp that comes down, both this and this. We're gonna do heavy contrast with those areas, so we can't, for stormwater, we can't necessarily raise a lot of places here for like raised crosswalks, but we can do a lot of contrast with color and texture. We've added a number of crosswalks, so this was not in the original plan. We want to add that. That meets up with the existing stair back up to Two Rivers. We have kind of added this connection just to make sure that's really strong. We have a blow up of that to show how our vehicular access into the surface parking has changed. So if you remember, we kind of had two access points. We had another exit here. So we've been able to reorganize this really to just one exit and entrance. So you have one vehicular area here and the pedestrians can cross once. So we're able to kind of beef this up and, get a great outdoor space next to the parking area, get a great space for the tenants as well. Additional, that crosswalk was here. We also added this crosswalk here. So as James mentioned, the whole conversation with the neighbors and Alpine Bank and Tempranillo, and they have so many concerns. We want to make sure we don't, we no regrets planning, right? So who knows when anything up here might redevelop. So we've still got the building pulled back. There's a pedestrian walkway here, and then we've added a crosswalk here. So whether this is just folks from the hotel now that might kind of jump on that and cross, or at some point in the future, this connection back up to Midland does kind of culminate, and we're able to do something there. So that's pretty much it in the site. There's a couple of blow-ups, and I'll get into those, but for now, that's the kind of periphery.
Thanks, Heather. Next slide, James. Moving into 3D and the kind of the rendered views and the extra elevations. We'll jump into some of the changes and just kind of point it out. So as we can see, it's now a 3-story building. So the 2 stories on the front, we have the main grocery entrance that we can see in here. We've kind of tied this together a little bit differently, I think, since you saw it. So we've got the kind of the brick ends of the Main Street architecture mixed in. We've got some horizontal siding in the middle. We've got a little bit of the railroad steel canopy structure that really designates that grocery entrance. So we really want one entrance, but we will have a storefront all the way along it. This is that connection in. We can see that even with the reduced outdoor area, it still has a good presence and sense of entry. And then obviously upstairs, this was 2 stories set back, and now it's just 1 story up above. So it's come down quite considerably in that. Next slide, please, James. Moving to the Two Rivers entry view. So as we come across from Two Rivers, this is the new pedestrian connection into the building. So again, that important corner that we wanted to kind of break down the mass of it. So we have that kind of little sitting area. Windows that wrap around, again, those canopies that wrap around the building, so you can almost walk all the way around undercover, similar to parts of Main Street, which we think are great, and then especially with the western sun and the southern sun, and they help bring down the scale of the building as well. So we can see that 2-story, 3rd story above, and then we'll start catching a glimpse of what pretty much drastically changed on the south side. So next slide, please. So this elevation, we had a 4-story building, and in the configuration of it, it was more of in plan an I shaped or an H shape. Now we have kind of a U shape. So in order to still get, units on the site and bring it down 3 stories, we had to push it out to the south. So we can see that it pushed to the south and to on the east. The west side has to be the 0 setback with the building codes, and the south side wants to be part of that. But now we have the whole west and the south side and the east side that has that 0 setback. But again, we tried to break down the mass and scale. It's only a 3-story building versus a 4-story. We do have the overhead canopies. We can see a little bit more of that residential feel. We had a larger kind of, a little bit more, railroad industrial kind of feature with the circulation here. Now that's just residential units above. The circulation has been pushed back into the building. That also allowed for bringing the storefront across the face of the building more, so that activates the southern elevation. I think, Gino, you talked about that a little bit. So we were able to add more street frontage for the grocery area here, about 30 feet, 3 bays. Then in that character that we talked about is with, there was a lot of discussion with character and height. So we wanted to get more of that, Western Rocky Mountain flair to it. So we've added some gable volumes, which is, great for those living room units up top. And then we have low sloped roofs, flat roofs in between, with some low slope shed roof forms on the ends, and on some of the other units inside. Along with that, we've added a little bit more of that, exposed timber structure to the decks. We've got columns with, wood and steel down below that really kind of denote these 2 main entrances. One is, this is the pedestrian main entrance for the residences. So we feel this is really stronger now with the pedestrian and bike parking and, larger island. There's now a shorter way directly across from it to a larger kind of entry area. And then this is our community gathering space down below. So we've got mailboxes, barbecue, sitting area, all under cover. There'll be, kind of shade sails and, that really kind of creates that sense of entry. And we think it'll give the homeowners a nice sense of entry and ownership to having a nice project out front where they can kind of gather, talk, and just catch up, in the morning or at night. This is also an area where they can just kind of take their dogs or, animals out quickly and then run back inside if they need to. Let's see, moving down. And then this is where also, as we were obviously fighting with, we had an auto entry mixed with the pedestrian entry. So in talking through it, quite a few meetings, we decided let's just totally rethink it. Let's move the auto entry down, further away from it, separate it, keep the cars away from the people, make it a little bit more safer, and give this a more sense of entry into the project. So we think this has been really successful in doing that. Next slide, please. Moving further down the south to the southeast, again, the upper unit, slow slope shed roof, gable forms, another one of those kind of iconic pieces that we, really like, and starts talking about the architecture of the West. Here's part of that railroad trestle, kind of screening that we still have to screen the parking below. There's a lot of covered parking now with this building footprint above, so that's actually an enhancement. This is that auto entry that's in and out to the project. We still get, a good count for parking and meet the code, over and exceed the codes. We can start seeing as it relates to, we pulled in some imagery of the buildings around it, so we feel the mass, the scale, the character all fits in with what's, across the street and other projects in Basalt as well. So we feel really good about that. Again, some of the landscape on the ends to really help, soften it and help that parking in, as well as the building architecture with scale. Next slide, please. Moving around to the east, so the southeast corner, auto entry here, pedestrian entrance gathering. This is where the art mural, so things like, the owl sign up in Aspen. But again, we see that Western heritage with murals. This is where we've agreed to put the art on the building. We think it's going to be a good location. I think we had talked about something on that railroad structure that was here before, but with the redesign, this will be a good space for it. Again, this is the parking that carries down the eastern facade, the units above, kind of still the gabled forms with the overhanging balconies. Next slide, please. Moving around the north, this became is where it gets set back. So before we had the H, and these units were kind of in the middle. Now those are pushed all the way to the south, so there's actually a bigger setback now in the middle of the project where we have the Alpine Bank parking, the existing trees that are there. We'll have a fence for parking to block and screen that. And then, the new project beyond, we've got a couple units facing out this end. This is a stair and circulation tower, and then more units over here. So, again, gable forms mixed with low slope shed roofs to get that architectural character and break down the mass and scale. Next slide, please. This was an important study and part of the conversations with council and some of the neighbors. So this was an important view from Midland, looking across the street and to see how does the project affect the ridge line. And so, with some drone measurements and things like that, we were able to kind of estimate what we think would happen with the building on this. So we feel that, with the building at 3 stories, it does not break the ridgeline view. It should feel good and in character, and, with the vegetation that's there, it should fit in pretty well with what we have already. Next slide, please. Heather, I'll let you jump into this.
Thanks. So really, as I mentioned, I think the key here is just looking at our patio. So we did have to, again, we've got our turning movements here for our trucks. So they're entering kind of to the south of the building, and then they circle back around and then out. So we really pulled this back probably about half a parking space, so about 10 feet. And so we really still have, this is a 30-foot depth or so, just shy of that. So, and then what we did is we're gonna be able to do these planters, and then now this space has really great sense of just kind of permeability, right? So there was also this question of like, can I just get my shopping cart right out to my space? So now with this depth, that's exactly what's gonna happen. So kind of seating, walk right in, push your cart right out, just walk back and forth through this space. So have a lot of energy here. Still plenty of space to pull things out from the grocery store. So pull out displays, whether it's as simple as sandwich boards or whether it's, actually bringing some carts out, etc. We come across here, we've still got this really great little nook. So kind of this inviting, as you come down, this inviting corner seating area, big planters, Basalt known for those little garden-esque pockets. So we've got those here and here still that are just gonna burst out all summer. So kept all the integrity of what we had before, and now we know technically all of the loading zones are gonna work, and we've got all of our turning radius.
You could hit the next one too, just showing this.
Oh yeah, so you can go to the next slide, and this is just the blow up of.
This is just imagery of.
That's kind of the inside.
Yeah, the food court and the
court.
food hall, right.
And then next slide. There you go. So as mentioned now, right, you kind of have this approximately 30-foot depth, a little bit more than a car length, and just a lot of permeability. So, and all these details, we love the imagery, pulling in, still gonna pull in this like railroad evocative, even some of the benches, maybe they're kind of like this Victorian modern. So we're really excited to do the detailing in here. And again, we still have our bike parking, ton of bike parking over there, these little beautiful garden pockets, and plenty of space. And then I think there's one more view of this maybe that just gives that pedestrian eye. So again, really not necessarily like that's the planter we're gonna have, but more just this is the scale of the space and how it can feel. The string lighting, just like twinkling at night, really fabulous. Again, space to kind of pull things out if we need to. This has tons of that, like movable tables and chairs. So we might have a mix of just some that's street benches and some that's, true table and chair.
Residential.
And
Next.
then it goes, I think it goes, does it go right? Okay,
Yeah,
keep
next
going. Okay. So then, as Scott mentioned, and just to, take that step back, so most of our units have deck spaces to accommodate their private open space. A few do not. So we were able to aggregate those requirements into this private open space here. Right now, we see this as maybe a little bit of a blank slate, so we want to create kind of a nice open space and let the residents, kind of get into the building and see what they want, right? So we've done some that there was a personality and they wanted like some outdoor foosball and just sitting areas. Others like, yes, I would totally love whatever, some kind of maybe propane or induction grill, right? So we're gonna let that evolve a little bit, but that's their very private space. And then this, technically not counting towards our open space requirement, but rather public open space here and here. This encircles the existing cottonwood tree and then adds a couple more trees, so a shady little space, grassy. We made you turf, we'll see. And then, so basically just a little pet relief area, come out, if you do have a little bit of a smoking spot, etc. Big bike bank here. There's a ton of bike parking in the structure. This is all public, so this is all, I'm coming to the grocery or I'm coming to downtown, so big, like bike corral kind of approach. This outdoor area, again, somewhat flexible, but we see maybe some shade sails, and again, just kind of that comfortable respite spot, probably benches facing each other, just somewhere that everybody can sit, hang out, wait for their bus, wait for a ride, and just visit.
Next slide. This just shows those spaces three-dimensionally. So again, there's the connection to the residential entry here at this form. This kind of signifies it. There's that community space beyond. Next slide, please. This is just a closer look inside. Shows a bit of the character with the exposed exposed beams and deck elements. Next slide.
And you can see, I think one of the key too, like Gino, you talked about really just livening this whole front. So between gardens, welcoming at each corner, and then this, right? This doesn't feel private like what's behind the screen. This is very public, seating area, and just kind of get that color and people engaging in those outdoor spaces.
Okay, next slide. We'll just run through the plans really quick. So let's see, grocery stores, we could say the 9,000 or 9,500 square feet in this area. Loading dock is up here, or loading area. Trash area has been enlarged, I think, a bit with that. So we've got, the composting, the trash bins, the recycling bins there. We've added a residential recycle and compost component out here. So we've got trash in here and we've got compost and residential. We were talking back and forth, I think, with council and some other folks in town about the connection for the residences of how do they, use and circulate, and obviously for them to walk around the building to go to trash is difficult. For recycling and compost. The trash has a trash chute, which dumps down into this space, and then they would come down with their recycling and compost into this area. This is a gated fenced area, and then there's a connection for the garage recycle guys that can connect through here. We've got our utility meters back in here, so this is, back of house. Into the building, we've got mechanical on this end. Again, grocery store, grocery frontage. This is that extra 30 feet that was pushed out. The stair and the elevator were tucked in this corner down here. We could see the footprint of what that meant, and now it's tucked back into the building. We have created this kind of choreography of coming across and really have this covered residential entry. Again, this is the open space, that community, which is, kind of screened off from the cars. But then in this area, they have a nice sense of entry. This is where the auto entry, they can kind of come from their cars, walk in. We've got the mailboxes inside, elevator, and then stair that goes up to the two different levels, so we can see that. Let's see, parking is being reconfigured again. We went back and forth, and it was decided to maximize it and keep the tandem parking, so we feel that this still works well. We have our ADA spaces. Things to note in here is we've gone through a lot of iterations, but and while there is, we have decks and there's storage associated with it, there was a desire for as much bike parking as possible. So we're looking at different options inside with the design, looking at a lot of different sources all over the world as far as how are people being creative with it. So we've got, screen walls between the parking, so some residents may want it, some may not, but we can hang bikes, over the cars in those spaces. We've got this large area out back where we can have kind of multiple racks or multiple, 2 stories of bike levels as well. So, the stronger people can kind of lift their bikes and put it on the upper rack, and then we'll have the lower racks down below as well. So lots of creative solutions out there for bike storage that we feel is important to the project. Let's see, that's our exit connection. Again, yeah, this is that main auto in and out is one area now. Before we had an entry exit here, and then we had an exit, which really kind of was putting a lot of pressure on the parking out here and exiting and turning movements. So we feel that with the low, amount of traffic that's going out with the residences, this should serve us well. They can circulate around both ways, get into their parking spaces, get in and out without affecting, the grocery store as much and the residential entry pedestrian connection. So we feel that was an important move. Next slide, please. Moving up to the second level, again, so the first of the residential, these are the units that are pushed up, so again, with that 0 setback and getting that Main Street feel. These are the 8 units that do not have the decks out front, again, so it has that kind of downtown Basalt feel with the residential units that we have on Main Street don't have decks overhanging, so it's just the window. So again, that has that Main Street presence. Those are all studio units there. And then we kind of go, and here's the U shape. So we had an H before with the 2 bar in the middle. And now we pushed it out again to the south and to east to add density and maximize it as much as we can and keep it efficient with a double loaded corridor. We've got our lockers on the interior areas where those come together, so we can't have livable spaces without windows. So we've got a mixture of the blue studio units intersprinkled with the one bedroom units, and then we have 2 bedroom units sprinkled in as well. So we can see all those with their decks. Unit configuration and sizes they might have slightly tweaked here and there, but in general they're the same size as what they were before when you saw it. Next slide, please. Moving up to the 3rd floor again to get that repetition and efficiency, to get the amount of units that we can, and keep the affordability where it's desired. So again, 2 bedroom unit on the corner, and then 1 bedroom penthouse. So these are kind of the penthouse units overlooking, kind of the western side. More of the studio units, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And then this is a 1 bedroom on the corner that was pulled back. So again, to break down the mass and scale of that corner, because we're pushing the building out, but we felt that at least we can kind of pull that unit in so it's not just right out on the edge. So this is pushed back a little bit like that, so it has a nice feel, and that's a really nice unit sitting there. And that's a wrap on our presentation for tonight.
Great. Thank you very much. For right now, we'll do commissioner questions for either the applicant or for staff. Questions?
First question is, I think I've asked it before, on the east elevation, on the site plan in the east elevation, you have a strong pedestrian walk alongside the building, and it just kind of dead ends at the other property. Now, I know you've got another property, but have you made any attempt or any effort to work with the other owners to carry this pedestrian walk through?
We've spoken with each owner, and they're unanimous. I think James summed it up. They're concerned about people parking on their property. One's concerned about trash loading. The motel owner is concerned about people making noise and disturbing his guests. So we spoke with each, and that was one of the requests from the council, was that we go back and meet with everyone. So we did meet with everybody, and we couldn't get them to.
I asked the question because it's fundamentally wound into this property that it's trying to entice and get the Midland people and the pedestrians across to come easily to this facility, which would help you as well. And I'm just wondering if there is some nice way of, with trellis or some kind of landscaping or something to encourage, who would that be? It would be both the bank.
It's Alpine Bank, and we spoke to Ioane, and we spoke to Javier and Laura, and they own Tempranillo, and neither of them are that excited about having people walk across their property.
Okay.
So, it's a good question, but
The other,
We can only control our own property and,
no, I understand
I
that.
expect that development in those areas may be the inducement for something more to be opened up. You know, I think Ioane had written a letter to, I think to planning and zoning, but also to town council, that at some point Alpine would be attempting to expand or build something in that parking lot, and that may be
Makes sense.
the opportunity to.
Okay. I have just two more quick ones. One is, on the site plan, still on the south elevation, the south plan, you've got 3 fingers of concrete coming out. That's obviously sidewalks coming into the store. Being on the south elevation and being how we live in this town, have you thought about putting a tree or 2 trees in these stairs? Because they would thrive, and they also give shade to the lower areas. I'm just curious what you might be thinking.
I'm not entirely sure, but let's get to the site plan and probably respond. So each of our planting pockets, I guess I'd keep going to the full
That's-
site plan
that's
if you
the-
could. Yep, so.
That's the site plan I'm referring to.
Yeah, exactly. So we have trees pretty much in every planting pocket that we have. We'll put trees. We've basically made sure that any of those planting areas are aggregated enough that they're actually big enough to support trees. So trees, trees, tree. So at least one. Here we can probably fit 2. And then here's our existing cottonwood, and we're gonna do 2 additional trees, knowing that cottonwood may or may not.
I don't know what I'm looking at, because one site plan has got 3 fingers coming out, going to the south elevations, and this one you don't have any, or you just have the one.
3 fingers. I'm not sure I
Is it just
understand
a
fingers.
change of drawings, or
I'm not sure I understand fingers. Gino, tell me.
if you were to back up a little ways, that,
Oh, I think.
Middle is red.
Gate,
I'm not sure I understand fingers.
parking spaces.
Gino, are you referring to the ADA parking spaces where you've got the three little jet outs there for the ADA?
oh, okay, so that's, okay, I'm sorry, so it's not the south, it's the east.
Yep.
There we go.
yeah,
Never mind, I withdraw
the
that
west side,
question.
yeah.
Okay.
The
'Cause,
final
yeah, these are
question I
just
would have,
Trees here, trees here,
if I
trees,
may,
trees.
is,
Striping.
I noticed that you did put in a trash room. It was one of the suggestions that would come. But do you have any trash chutes so that people on the 2nd and 3rd floor don't have to carry? You do? Okay.
So trash chute goes there right to the trash, and then recycle and compost is
Okay.
now here. And that is a trash chute.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cindy?
Hi, welcome back. I have some questions on both the residential and the commercial. And I'll start with the residential. I started thinking after we had a presentation and a discussion here on another proposed project last month that is proposed to be all rental units. And there were a lot of locals who stood up, and one of my fellow commissioners too, who were really in favor of ownership rather than rental. And so I wonder, would you consider making all or part of this project ownership?
We've resisted that for 2 reasons. One is the financing's a lot more complicated and expensive. And 2, there's a construction defect issue that comes with selling something. So you have in Colorado, an 8-year tail liability, so the insurance is a lot more expensive. And we think the workforce housing that we're proposing is best managed as rentals.
So at some point then you will be selling the building. I assume you don't want to be landlords forever, correct?
We have to see how that goes, but we don't have any intent, we don't have any plans to condominiumize at this point.
When you say condominiumize, mean
Sell them off as individual units.
as it, yeah. So my concern, and this might be a question for staff, is how would we protect ourselves as a community? Say because I don't think there's been a project like this before, or it's been all rentals that has been built. Like, there's the one on 82. I forget who the owner is, but
The Roaring Fork
they're-
Apartments?
yeah. They're a company that owns that, that they own those kind of rental things across the country. So how would we, assure that we don't have this ready-made project and then say like one major employer just buys it as housing for their employees in the valley, which I don't think would be serving our community, to have a building like that as the gateway to our community. So is there anything, I'm wondering, of staff that we could put in, that requires a certain number of people, that they have to live in the town, be employed in the town? Any measures like that?
So our standard deed restriction does not address specific employers. It keeps units available to anybody who qualifies. You could make a recommendation to add a clause into the deed restriction that the number of units are not sold to a single employer. I don't know that that's been an issue at the Roaring Fork Apartments per se, so I don't know that that would be an issue here, but it's certainly a possibility. But you could propose a condition for the deed restriction that way.
Because I know like Basalt Vista has that with teachers, and I think emergency workers or healthcare workers. So I'm wondering if that's something that we could do for this.
Sure. There is also a priority system. So Basalt residents have priority, and then it moves down for all deed restricted units, if I'm saying that right. So we could also add a condition.
Residents or employees?
Employees.
Employees in the town of Basalt, is the first priority level. Actually, the first priority level is essential employees that work in the town of Basalt, which includes, utility personnel, police, fire, and it actually includes teachers. And then second priority is typically any other employee that works in the town of Basalt, and then it waterfalls down to between Aspen and Glenwood.
So can I ask Cindy a question? Or should
Yeah.
I? So the town has a first right of refusal on this building, no? As proposed in the application?
Oh,
Does it?
so.
So right of first offer.
Okay.
Right at first offer.
But you'd have the town buying the building potentially, and you would kind of be negating that by putting a clause in that an entity couldn't provide housing for themselves.
No,
Like-
I'm not saying against one entity. I'm saying if there could be some kind of priority system for, like at a Basalt Vista, that, people would be working, that we would prioritize people working locally in Basalt.
Doesn't that already exist?
But
Yeah.
doesn't
We
that
have that.
exist in
Code already
their
does
agreement?
that.
Already there.
But staff could
But-
outline it better for the second meeting.
So Cindy, you're worried that if the conditions that we put in, that they proposed about the 60%, 6-month leases and everything else, you're worried that if they sell it, that those wouldn't carry forward? Is that what your fear is?
Well, that is one of my questions. I mean, I assume that would carry forward, but I'm not sure. No, just that we would have housing for our community, in our community, and that it wouldn't just become a big, bedroom project for somewhere else. That's my concern. If the town bought it, then
So
that's a
you would want to
different
make sure
story.
Ski-Co couldn't purchase it and use all the free market units?
Yeah, or the
towards their own
hospital, or,
employees.
we have a couple big employers here who could do that potentially, which I don't think is the spirit of what our town would want in the middle of town.
Okay.
It's just something to
No,
think
I
about, you know?
respect what you're saying.
You know, and also the ownership, because so many people spoke up about
We can
ownership.
circle
the
back to
last
having a
meeting.
conversation about that if you have other questions.
Okay. Yeah, and then the commercial part, what is the plan B for the grocery store if that doesn't work out?
There is no plan B. We're gonna make it work.
Okay.
We're
'Cause
we're very excited about it. We don't have a specific user plan because we can't get someone to commit until we have an idea what we can do. But we think there's, there are, I mean, I think the code, Tim would know more than me, but I think if for whatever reason a grocery store didn't work out, there are other uses specified in the zoning that are permitted for that. Does that
Like
make
just
sense?
straight commercial or,
Well, I believe on this site, and I can get clarification on this, that basically if they can't make a grocery work, they have to come back with another use for approval, is my recollection of the site.
okay. I mean, I personally haven't spoken to a grocer who thinks that a project in this, a space that size is financially feasible. So that's what I'm basing it on. And then we were talking before about, so will the liquor store, it will be part of the grocery store?
The liquor store will be separate.
Does it fall under the less than 30% breakdown that you talked about at the beginning of the meeting?
The liquor store has to be a separate operation. The grocery definition includes a minimum, a maximum percent of the floor area that can be for non-food items like that. Like, I think,
Okay, so those restrictions don't apply to the liquor store, correct?
Is the liquor store square footage?
I have to review that. We plan
Okay.
to have the liquor store continue. That's a very successful little business, and he's been great, so we're
Okay,
planning to have him continue.
okay.
Heather, you were saying the the square footage is part of the 9,000, 9,500.
Yeah.
It is.
And
Definition of grocery store includes no more than 30% can be consumed of the 9,000 in the use of liquor. Liquor store itself is part of that 9,000.
okay, that's what so I assume because you've talked to the operator that that's enough
Mhm.
to offer a selection
It is.
of
And
liquors?
I think the cap there,
Okay.
Cindy, is to make sure it doesn't all turn into a liquor store.
Okay,
That was actually the concern that we were up against from staff earlier. So,
okay.
probably not Michelle, but.
A last quick question, because Scott mentioned people going out to walk their dogs. Does it mean that it's pet friendly?
It has to be. Yes.
Okay.
You can't even make something not pet-friendly anymore because of service animals. They are going to be involved in the residence area, so they're gonna exist. You gotta make sure you're accommodating that, and it's not a problem. So you gotta take over that as a proactive stance that it's pet-friendly.
Okay, for everybody,
With
not just
limits,
service
I mean-
animals, right?
We've learned not to have carpet in the elevator, for example.
And some other
Okay.
things.
Because, it's so hard to find a place to live here if you have a pet, unless you are an owner.
There's some, how many pets, et cetera. Are they
Yeah,
reptiles?
sure.
Are they birds? All that goes
Okay.
into this. Does that help? You were trying to ask something else.
No, just the pet. Yeah, okay, that's it.
Thank you. Bill?
All right, I have a few questions. The first one was pretty much answered by you guys about the grocery store tenant, but you have a high level of confidence, it seems, that you have some tenants that would operate a size
Yeah, I think
store like that.
what's also going on is the flexibility of that definition is allowing us to think beyond a traditional, I don't know what kind of grocery operator you might have been talking to, but understand that there's flexibility in that definition that is what will make it work.
Because my question was about your level of confidence, that's all, that's kind of where I was going with that. My next question is one that when I was in grad school and was asked of me, it would just piss me off royally, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. The back of house, are you guys sure that all the stuff programmed to fit in there is gonna fit in there? Because 60 meters doesn't look like it's gonna fit in that room. And all kinds of other things I've been part and parcel with, like big compactors for grocery stores, doesn't look like it would fit in that spot. So it would, you have to be eating away from your leasable square footage. So I wanted to ask about that.
There's room on that north side, don't you think, Scott, in terms of some flexibility
We're
for
still
both
working out the final details.
back-of-house operations as you're describing, plus utility functions. We know where the trash chute needs to be, and that's in that area too. But you're right, Bill, it's never big enough. Over those buildings we've built at Willits over the years, it's, even when you think they're big, or the parking areas are looking big, they're not.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I've gotten my personal butt in a crack about these things, and I really hate that to happen here.
Yeah, we've certainly thought it through pretty seriously, and it's not
Okay,
like
good.
we've just put whatever was left into the function area. For instance, that trash room did grow in size since the last time you saw this building.
Okay. And my next question is a very similar one. In all of the units, all of the bathrooms look pretty small for type B functions that are required with the code moving forward. You know, the adaptability part. In order to make that work, you'd have to use kind of the tuck under type of vanities, which for non-handicap use is subpar. So I just want to make sure that you have that level of confidence, because if you had to expand your bathrooms in size, it would affect the entire plan and unit count.
Working through all those details.
Yeah, but that's, I'm just looking at that and saying,
Flag.
well, yeah,
Yeah, good flag.
again, that's been a bugbear of mine in affordable housing over the years. Those are my only real questions.
Thank you, Bill. Todd?
A question for staff, going back to the grocery store and why this, the grocery store is a permitted use within this district. Why this approval locks them into just a grocery store?
Well, that was the way it's written. If they choose an anchor use, which they're, in the CSC zone district, you have anchor uses and then you have accessory uses. And so on the different properties that are considered in the CSC zone district, which was the Basalt River Park property and the BCC property, it had specific anchor uses that the town, at the time they wrote the zone district, was interested in seeing, you know, established on those different properties. And so the anchor uses that were identified for the BCC property include the grocery store, they include a brew pub of a certain size and a hotel, basically. And so the way the code was written is that if they establish a specific anchor use as part of their site-specific development plan, and that anchor use goes out, then they have to come back with another use to supplant it, and it gets reviewed by the P&Z and council. I just looked that up in the code here.
I guess I would like, maybe at the next meeting, clarity on that, because it's, I guess I don't read it the same way, and it seems that of the following anchor uses must occur, it just says an anchor use must occur, and they have those other options. And it clearly defines that it seems that they don't have to choose just one. I guess I just would like us to make sure that we don't cause more strain if the grocery store doesn't work and they have to make a change based on, they already know what the other permitted uses could be.
We can look at that. I think that's an interesting point, Kyle. As I recall, I haven't looked at that lately, but the grocery anchor use allows a fourth floor, whereas the others do not.
Right, you are now
This is
within.
no longer a fourth floor building,
Yes,
so it might open that up to
and
utilization.
it's still
of those
very
other-
strict that your entertainment space has to be 9,000 square feet, and you're basically just left with, I mean, you could do some other things in here, but I think without the fourth floor, they may have the opportunity to not be locked into a grocery store. And it seems like it may be best for us, knowing the environment that we could be in 2 years, that they may need optionality.
And I think, you know, the P&Z could make a recommendation in the site-specific approval that they could substitute with another anchor use. regardless of what the code says, so you could consider that.
Okay, if the code doesn't require it, then maybe, like, we shouldn't have to put it on to be a,
Well, the code definitely requires that if they start operation as an anchor use and you bring in another use, then
right, but
it
just,
requires P and Z and council.
but just start, okay, but just maybe clarity for the next one then, or just to ensure that the,
Okay,
interpreting it correctly.
sure.
That's my only question, thank you.
Bob?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I wouldn't want to be a guy sitting in front of council saying you're not going to put it in the supermarket, so I would not advise that.
Not going to be,
Sitting in front of council telling them you're not going to put it in the supermarket, I don't think that would be well received, so I'd say stay the course with that one for now. James and Michelle, I do have a question for you. You point out for us when an application has consistency with the master plan. Do you guys look for inconsistencies with the master plan?
Mhm.
And you would point those out to us as well?
Yes.
Never really seen it. So either people are doing a really good job following the master plan, or you guys aren't looking for that one, but you do.
We do. We typically, we work with the applicant before the application is submitted to you, and you'll see maybe in a later application tonight where if there's something inconsistent, we'll recommend denial.
So a couple of questions on the site. Do you guys have an actual parking plan? For instance, I know there's 58 public spaces, but what if the people in residences decide to leave their cars there? Or their second cars there, or their trailers?
what you're asking about, Rob, is what happens if a resident is using the outside spaces? That'll be controlled by way of property
You have
management.
plans
lease
to control
requirements. Absolutely.
Okay, that was it.
Yeah, you don't want residents out there taking commercial spaces, and there's an adequate number of parking spaces for those residents. Although
Right,
there
but-
are the 16 that are outside, that are designated specifically for that, but you don't want that kind of competition.
And I just want to make sure you had a way to enforce
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was a requirement of the HOA too.
Last time we spoke, we talked about maybe, or you were going to look at the entrance into the project off of Midland.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've sat there trying to get out, make a left turn, and been unable to, and had to go right and around Midland Spur to get out of there. And I didn't look like anything had changed. Is it something you guys looked at?
We looked at it, and because of the way the truck loading and the truck route, or the backing in and the getting in and out of that dock area happens, that confirmed that space, frankly, it functioned for that truck in the years past, and it's also what needs to be there now. There could be some additional signage, and, you know, the way in which we handle the pavement and the pedestrian crosswalks will probably help with kind of clarifying that.
My
Also,
question
the
is-
cars will be queuing in, because there'll be less lead up, so to speak, of that really wide asphalt area that the cars are coming from all over the place to get to
Right.
that queue. And that'll be minimized because of the throttling down of that area.
Is it being minimized away from Two Rivers?
No, it's not being changed. Where you see the curb entrances right now is where they will need to stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not going to change?
No.
That's too bad.
No.
Just a quick one on the 6-month leases, right? So that we don't do STRs. And then is there a clause in that lease that prevents that tenant from short-term renting?
Absolutely.
They can't sublet their place?
It's deed restricted
Well, yeah.
against that.
Yeah, I
How
mean,
would that work out, Valley?
that's one thing that may be worth recognizing, that 100% of this building is deed restricted by way of that one right there.
And then finally, on the public part of the patio, are they allowed to serve alcohol? Anybody?
I think they should.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll be asking for that.
their liquor license.
That would be a
have
liquor
to
through the
license
liquor
ask for that.
from the supermarket
Mhm.
Yeah.
to serve there.
Sure.
Great. All for it. That's all.
I don't have any questions at this time. So what I'd like to do now is open this up for a public hearing for public comment at 7:22. If you're in the room and want to talk, if you can come up and state your name, and do we want addresses? And where you live, and then, James, do you want to give that first, or you want to do the online as well before we start?
Why don't we do those in the room first, and then we'll do the
Okay.
online
So,
announcement?
just, your name, please, sorry.
My name is Gonzo Mirich. I own Jimbo's across the street. I just want to acknowledge how much work it's been put on your end, these guys, and city council, the town itself. I gotta say, Basalt, it's really, worried about us, about BLT, and I can, you guys know because you are following the project from very close, but, we're all working towards making this work, and I just want to say I really appreciate, and to make it, obviously these guys wanted to be done tomorrow. I think the pace it's moving is kind of like what they projected, and that's because you guys are, open to listen and bring your very specific and very important concerns, because, at the end of the day, what's done and then cannot be undone. I just want to say, thank you. We're still fully on board with the project. It's going to be painful for us because I don't know if you guys are aware, once we get our new liquor license, now we're applying for an expansion of premises, and we're going to hope to put a office container parking lot over there by that elk over there, so it's still within the HOA. And it's not gonna be pretty, to work out of that for a year, but because we are so, involved with this, we all agree that this is not what Basalt is, and something among what these guys are working on is what we need here. So we, it's just fully on board. It's just hopefully we can, all work together, when we come and say, oh yeah, we're gonna do this expansion of premises, we're gonna work out of a container in the parking lot, make it Jimbo's Express. People are gonna be parking there, and I'm gonna be like, every time I sell one cold beer, run behind and put a cold one, because I'm not gonna have a walking cooler, but, we're in this together, we're gonna make it work, and it's just gonna be great. But I really appreciate all your valued questions, because, it's just makes they're proposing something and then we're proofing it to make it the best. Because again, once it's done, hopefully it's done for good. So,
Great.
Thank you guys.
Anybody else in the audience? James, you want to look at the online, please?
Yeah, we have people currently online, but they are all consultants for the next item. But I will read briefly here. The way to access the meeting, we have it up on the screen, is to look at the second page of the packet that is online at basalt.net. And you can call in at the number 669-900-6833, and you'll need the webinar ID, which is 836-0597-0900, to enter and provide comments. Do we want to give a minute to see if anybody pops on?
Give a minute. So put on the clock.
When is the next date for this meeting?
2 weeks.
Huh?
2 weeks.
Which is June 1?
7th.
June 7th, thank you.
I'm going to be impatient and call it. So we're going to close the public comments at 7:27. We're not looking for approval tonight, so if we do want to have a preliminary discussion of any of the items that can be afforded, or we can just move to a motion to table this until our next meeting.
I have one thing I'd like to discuss. The timing of providing the grocery/housing, and I think this may tie in my first comment, it may become null and void, but if you are locked into a grocery store, it says that you have proposed to provide proof of a lease with the grocery store tenant and financial security before you get residential CO. I think that could be a dangerous precedent, that we may want to enable ourselves to have housing even if you cannot get that space open immediately. And you would have locked yourself in, and then we'd have to go back to get council to approve something. So maybe it's an or statement and not an and statement, just as a thought of.
That was not our idea, so we're welcome to that conversation.
Okay, well, it was written as applicant has proposed. So if it wasn't your idea, then I guess something for staff to consider.
Well, they did it to ensure that the grocery store comes online, right? But
I'm saying that,
all of a sudden, we're holding the housing hostage, which could be problematic.
especially considering that, yes, where we are right now in this environment and where we could be, it could be
So,
very
I
difficult
mean,
to.
maybe you release half of the housing right away and the other half upon.
It's a discussion item,
Something to be
yeah.
wordsmith, yeah. Bill?
Okay, I have some general comments to make. I made these before, but I think I'll make them again. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for all the work on the plans and elevations you guys did. You took our comments to heart and made some real improvements. I thought that the interior circulation is much better than it was before. I thought it didn't function very well in where the elevator was and the way that all the hallways were functioning, especially for ADA use. I think the public spaces are much, much better than they were previously, both interior and exterior. I think the loading is better than it was. I don't think it worked well before. And so, you know, by tweaking it, I think that helped quite a bit. But for the most part, I said this last time that, you know, our 2020 master plan we set it out to be a visionary plan. And this parcel was the most visionary part of that plan. And right now, we're looking at what is, and understandably so from financial reasons and business reasons, we're looking at the least visionary of the three proposals that we looked at there. And at that, what we have here is a pretty conservative reading of that option as well. You know, this is not a criticism, but I'm disappointed in a way. You know, we set out to do something, and this was what I saw as sort of the crown parcel in downtown Basalt. And we're getting something that meets the requirements of what we asked for, but, you know, it just barely. The design itself is, from an urban design standpoint and an architecture standpoint, it's a very, the only way to say it is a very missionary position interpretation of what we were asking for. It's very, very middle of the road. Not that that's a bad thing, you know, it's okay. But I was always hoping for something, you know, that was real, you know, for our crown jewel property, blow our socks off, and this doesn't do that. But that being said, this project does do what it sets out to do very well. If it isn't an understated manner, I understand where that's coming from a business and practicality standpoint. To do something visionary is very expensive, and in a tight approvals market, I don't know if I myself would take the risk of doing that. But on this side of the chair, I am wanting to say that because we set out to do something, and we put a lot of work into that, and it just sort of, you know, went over everybody's head. And I'm sad for that, but I can understand where you guys are coming from as far as how we got here. That's my full comment.
Any other comments? I'm gonna add on the bill and then kind of tweak it a little bit. And I agree, I think they check off the boxes, and I think it's really good. I actually think from an environmental standpoint and going all electric and adding the compost and the recycling, it's actually very forward-thinking in that sense, beyond maybe what the architecture might be, or you're right, being the blow our socks off thing. So I agree, they're checking off boxes, and that's not a bad thing either, but it's not maybe the, oh, wow, kind of thing.
I concur with everything you said.
Comments?
I would just echo what Bill said. He's said it more eloquently than me, but I just feel sad in a way. I go to other towns and I see really cool things that they've done. I was in Golden last week and saw such a cool project called the Golden Mill that they turned into this 2-level food hall. It was 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. There were a ton of people out there. One level was pet friendly. They had 6 different food vendors. They had this really cool two walls of taps for self-service beer, wine, cocktails, cider. Fire pits going. It was such a cool vibe. And it was right along the river, and I thought, God, I wish we could do that in Basalt.
If there are no other comments, the recommendation is to continue this to another public hearing on June 7th. Do we have a motion?
Motion to.
Motion from Gino. Bill seconds. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We'll see you.
Thank you.
See you in a couple weeks.
It's really nice to have everybody together. This is refreshing.
Yeah, Gonzo, sorry, I'm sorry,
One thing on Eric's note, why this, how to say that, we're gonna give this CO first to commercial or first to, because, they're gonna be trying to find someone or not to do the grocery, the bathrooms might not be ready upstairs, we're gonna be ready.
Yeah.
And so, if, our square footage is ready, whomever is ready to get a CO approved, walks in the building, get a CO, and we'll see them start working, right? I'd say, just no one has to be first or second,
Okay,
right?
cool. Thank you, no, appreciate that.
Thank you all
No
very
reason to
much.
hold up a liquor store. No reason to hold up a liquor store.
No, none at all.
No, that's a good point.
As we transition, Heather's putting on her other hat.
Talk about the grass?
No, that's last, that's not for a while. No, the next item is a work session regarding the Midland Avenue Streetscape project. And I think we're gonna be asked to provide some feedback on some of the conceptual concepts. Am I giving to Heather, to staff? Who's taking the lead on this one?
We're gonna give it,
Let me promote Catherine here just a quick second. Let me share my screen as well.
And if you want, you could take a second, promote that team, would be great.
Yeah, let me allow all of them to talk here.
Thanks, James.
Catherine, can you hear us? I think you're muted still, Catherine.
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes, there we go.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry. Thanks all for, can you see me or, sorry?
No, we can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, that's good enough. Hi all. For those of you I have not met, my name is Catherine Christoph. And I am the town engineer for Basalt. Thanks for having us this evening. I'm just going to quickly introduce the project. As I think you all know, the town prepared 3 projects for the voters in November to vote upon in a bond measure, and one of those was the Midland Avenue Streetscape project. We went out for an RFP for a design team, and CMGC, which is a construction manager, general contractor, and we awarded the designing of the project to a team led by Connect One Design, along with Sopris Engineering and Cushing Terrell. And we also have Stutzman Gerbaz on board, who's helping us with pricing and constructability efforts. So staff and that team, along with Phil Vaughn Construction Management Inc., who's been acting as an owner's rep, have been helping us with this project, ushering it along. We've had a concerted public outreach effort, and now the team has been working hard on these 3 conceptual plans. Thank you for those of you who are able to attend the work session with council that we had a couple weeks ago now, and tonight we're just circling back with you, and I'll really let Connect One take it from here, but we're just hoping for you all to really give us some good concerted feedback tonight that we can take forward as this group continues their refining of these conceptual designs. So thank you all.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm Heather Henry, principal, one of the founders of Connect One Design. Appreciate being here. Can't tell you how excited we are to be doing this project. I remember this discussion in 2002 when I was working with Susan on the river implementation plan. So we are honored, frankly, to be leading this team. There's a few team members online. I believe Kim Bongries with Cushing Terrell is online. Art Melito with Cushing Terrell. We've got, who else?
Michael White.
Yep, with Cushing Terrell. And then Phil Vaughn Construction. So he has been the owner's rep for the town. Elise Wolf is our illustrious project manager. So she is herding black cats in the dark, to say the least at this point. Okay, next slide. So some of you were at our joint work session last week. So for you guys, a little bit of repeat. But I think because we've got 4 of you that were not here last week, we really want to at least go through some of these early slides quickly. Our very first is what we call the no fooling around schedule, okay? So this is NFA for sure. We have, on our next slide, you'll see some dates. We're tweaking these a little bit. I just had a conversation with Catherine. Gino, you were asking who was speaking. So that's Catherine Christoph. She's the town engineer. She is our project manager. So while we work with all of staff, Catherine is our go-to.
Thank you.
I think at home either sick herself or with a family of them. So we move really quickly between now and probably what we're adjusting is, say, early to mid-July to have kind of full preferred design that we're moving forward with. And then at that point, we are 30, 60, 90% design between now and the end of the year. So just so you know, for a $11 million project, it is a speedy turnaround. What we're trying to do is get to our guaranteed maximum price basically by January so that we are ordering materials. Tutzman Gerbaz is moving forward as soon as we can in the spring. We have a construction season of next year, probably certain close down periods, close down through the winter. And then we may be finishing in, say, spring with landscape, irrigation, all those things you can't do, towards the end of a construction season in early 2024. So very quick turnaround, respecting the businesses and keeping Midland open. Next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, we're with you tonight. Likely we then see you guys again mid-June with at least what we hear tonight, what we heard from council, and then we're out with a second survey right now, and we'll make sure you guys know where that is located because we'd like you to take that also. All of that's going to kind of be packaged into taking like what's at this big in the design funnel down to about here, with a number of options mid-June, and then again in the next 3 weeks from that, moving towards preferred design. So these dates are going to tweak a little bit, but in general, they're about right. Next slide, please. So some of you have been here since the earth cooled, some of you not. Some of you may have seen these historic photos, some not. The key really is that we're about to build what we see as the 4th generation of Midland. Okay, so there have been 3 generations previous. So the first was as the original railroad town. And basically what that looked like in some of these slides is a bit like this. So we had these fabulous little buildings that we see here. We had these adorable boardwalks, like quintessential Old West. And then we had a big broad, as the railroad came out, big broad dirt streets, okay, generation number one. Generation number two was a lot of that stayed, so you still had some boardwalks, some transition to concrete, but then we just paved. So everything that was dirt, we just paved it. Generation number two just turned it to asphalt. Big, I mean, that is a wide street section right there. And so that's kind of what it looked like for quite a while. And then we had, and this is 50s, I think. And then kind of late 70s, 80s, we had third generation. So, sorry, this one would be second generation. So third generation kind of here, a little bit after this actually. So third generation was curb and gutter. So all the curb and gutter came in, it kind of pushed the parking out a little bit. You got a little bit more sidewalk, and you have kind of what's there today. So a lot of that had happened in the 80s, and then we haven't seen too much since then. You can go to the next slide. So we're pulling from some of these things that you'll see later, kind of having some fun with that. We're also talking about the fourth generation. So that means, we're about to build this for many, many years to come. And for us, that means really pushing ourselves to think about what the future looks like, whether it's bringing smart street technology, and that may be everything from 5G to how you're using apps for temporary loading zones, how you're using technology to actually do some of the parking enforcement, things like that, get away from chalk on the old tire. Thinking about small areas of green-powered snow melt, so we are not bringing front loaders out to chip 8 inches of ice all winter long, to different street tree technology, etc. So for us, these are some of the things that you're going to see as we get into detailed design. Next slide, please. This is like lightning fast. So hopefully you guys saw in your packet the site analysis. For us, there are a lot of this observational, some of it is technical. We received an entire street tree analysis from the arborist, so that is factoring in. So we have a base map, but we also have this site analysis. There are sacred spaces that the community has said, please don't touch this, right? It's not just that Codger Corner should stay and be in a little open space, it should be as it is now, right? So that's kind of what sacred means. Trees, things like that. So site analysis, obviously, if you have any questions, if you've had a chance to look that over, feel free to ask us. Next slide, please. Okay, so we did a whole outreach phase, kind of community survey number 1. We also did a pop-up at Codger's Corner. And so a lot of that was just this initial, what do you want to see here? What are the main things that you think would make this unique to Basalt, you think should be included in the project, etc. So both in our pop-up and online, we had a lot of alignment around what people were interested in seeing. Outdoor dining, pedestrian first design, no question. Trees, hanging baskets, planting flower beds, etc. Not just when you got to check that box, but when people said what makes it uniquely Basalt, that was overwhelming. So I think this idea, how Basalt really blossoms in these little pocket areas, big areas, etc. Really important. And then the street furnishings, how that can really make a space was a big deal. Parking, so parking obviously still came up. What ranked highest was visitor parking, just making sure that people can get to downtown and shop and eat and play and have fun. Bike infrastructure, really high. I think it just made it outside of the top 5. Lower on the list was electric infrastructure, so electric cars, electric bikes, etc. The feedback really was that those spaces are not being used right now, so let's not use precious space for that. From our perspective, we're building for the next generation, so what we're doing on a lot of projects is just making sure that we have the conduit available. You can pull the actual lines when you need to, sizing the electric infrastructure that it can kind of take those things on, and it's probably less than 10 years from now, right? That you need a lot more e-parking. So we had a lot of discussion about parking. We're gonna have a good talk about that tonight. There were some encouraging things. People are saying, hey, I would walk further. If it's a cool walk, I'll walk 1,000 feet. I'll walk the length of Midland. If it's awesome, I'll park a little further away, which was great. I think we also saw in the question that James is scrolling to, sometimes the challenge can be when someone says adequate parking, like what do they mean? You know, one is, I want to park 20 feet from where I want to go. So did you ever get to downtown and you just had to leave? You literally couldn't find a single place to park ever anywhere and you had to leave. And it's like that thin little sliver. So 5% said, I always get to downtown and I can't find anywhere, okay? So pretty thin margin. And generally kind of this, super encouraging. Sometimes that happened, rarely. I never get there and I can't find a space, okay? So again, really encouraging as we start to talk about how we might rearrange and rethink things. The last bullet points James will scroll to is really just in this open-ended version, what would make this unique, what's really important to you. Keep it funky, keep it simple, let's not go overboard, do the things we need to do, but like we still gotta make sure we keep it Basalt, right? It's gotta resonate with rivers and fishing and outdoors and everything else. And the historic charm. So historic and railroad was mentioned, 30% of the time in the open-ended comments. We have been meeting with and surveying the owners, so owners of buildings, parcels, and tenants, essentially through all of Midland. So throughout this project, we will have the information and the contact for every single owner and tenant along Midland. We've probably gotten to about 50% of those, maybe a little bit more. We can go to the next slide. Elise will give you, again, just kind of the top 5, what we're hearing from those folks.
Yeah, so as we talked about parking with them, they are self-admitting that a lot of the issue with not being able to park or that patrons can't park is that their own employees are parking on Midland and that there is just no enforcement of the 2-hour parking rule. We did hear a lot of issues about snow, icing, and storage. As far as their visionary goals, lots of comments about trees and hanging baskets. They don't want it to look like Willits, that it's inherently different. And they mentioned the same kind of words that we're hearing from the survey. It should feel like home, small town, family living, comfortable, cozy, quaint, convivial, vital. And then as we talked to them about construction concerns, overwhelmingly, they're on board, they're excited for this to happen. They're nervous, and they just said, just rip the Band-Aid off. We know it's gotta come, but just do it and do it fast. And they want to be communicated with constantly.
All right, next slide. Okay, so we're gonna get into the meat of our options here this evening. So we have taken, since we began in this project, did a big team charrette, got staff involved, etc. So we developed what we called kind of 3 different showcases, and we're not calling them alternatives, they're not labeled 1 through 3, because we really see this as a kit of parts, right? I can pull this, 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 and this, and that's how we're gonna put together the preferred design. This probably looks a bit overwhelming, so what I'm making sure that we're doing tonight is out of this, the things that you see highlighted here. So our sidewalk width, our outdoor dining, our pedestrian focus, the parking strategy, traffic circulation, okay? We really wanna just go through these showcases, talk a little bit about those pieces, and then spend most of our time talking about that, okay? When you think about why this project came to be, out of the master plan, ultimately out of the facilities plan, we wanna make sure we're having that conversation in this, right? So we don't just wanna focus on a parking number or something like that. Like, we really wanna talk about the vitality, the vibrancy, the safety. Why are we even doing this? We've got underground utilities that are almost 100 years old. We've also got sidewalks that are wildly unsafe, right? You can hardly get a stroller up them, let alone a scooter or a wheelchair. You've got icing issues. So we're doing that, and then what, right? What are we doing past that? We're trying to kind of create this sense of downtown, this place that people go to and they're like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest vibe ever. Now, we might not be doing that by cleaning it all up and it looks the same, so you'll see that in these differentiators, okay? So tonight, we're gonna, again, as I said, we're talking about what we're changing in this cross-section. We have about little over 80 feet, building front to building front. What do we want to do with that? And that's what these different options talk about, okay? So we'll go to the next slide. So our 3 showcases are called Rooms, Linear, and Woonurf. Just so you know, Woonurf is Swedish, Scandinavian, Swedish?
One of those.
Yeah, Swedish,
I thought it was Danish.
Danish.
Nick
They're the
Aceto
same?
told me
They're
that.
different. Okay, they're Danish. It means living streets. Okay, so the idea with Woonurf is that every part of that street is kind of moving, vibing, you know, it can be something. So just keep that in mind. So our first was rooms. The idea with rooms is that you're using, for Midland, we want to use the building facades, this like pattern that was created to create a space out in front of it. So a lot like the boardwalks did in those historic images, this building, and it had a boardwalk. And that was the little space out in front. That was like their front porch. So think of rooms as a little like front porches. It spills out. It can be very different, very eclectic. The pedestrian movement through rooms can kind of do this. It's still safe, it's ADA, but it might be different outside of Midland Shoe than it is the Brick Pony. Okay, so that's rooms. There's a lot of kind of activity in those spaces out front. Go to the next slide. So linear tends to be like it sounds. A streetscape is by nature quite linear. There's a lot of movement back and forth. It tends to be in one direction or the other. And linear really rolls with that. It uses the design to kind of accentuate that. It tends to have maybe a little bit more uniform patterns. The paving might be fairly similar throughout. And then obviously you have crossings and things like that, but it draws your eye forward. It makes you kind of want to walk down the street. And then the last one, the Woonurf. So the key with Woonurf, and you'll see this as we get into the cross section, it's pretty wide open. It basically gets rid of the curb and gutter. It tends to make the entire space, once you enter the Midland sort of historic zone, say at BCC, the vehicle gets very subservient and the pedestrian is at the top. They are effectively allowed to sort of circulate anywhere in a way, okay? Woonurf, in our example, might entirely also change the grading, the stormwater. You might start drawing everything to the middle of this street. Go to the next slide.
Can I ask
So-
you a quick question on that?
Sure.
Do you have a real life example of that within the valley or even in Denver? I'm just trying to picture something.
There's one in Denver, Cherry Creek North, called the Fillmore Plaza.
Okay.
It's like lots of paving, there's no curb and gutter, and it's meant to like house pedestrians.
Okay, cool.
But you
Thank
can drive a car through it.
Here, no, I mean, because
think there's
it'd be like the Aspen Mall, but there's no vehicles, so I don't think there's a great example in the valley.
Okay.
Okay, our rooms. So rooms has, again, we're trying to kind of focus on the few things we talked about. How much pedestrian realm do we have? Truly dedicated pedestrian that has outdoor dining, etc. What's the street width and what might the kind of loading and that sort of parking scenario look like? So rooms. Rooms has one of our largest pedestrian, cross sections, okay? So south side of the street, north side of the street facing south. So think about, the Midland Mall and Brick Pony, that whole side. You end up with a 16 to 24 foot pedestrian experience and pedestrian zone. So really in rooms, most things are gonna happen in that zone. Outdoor dining, all the sandwich boards, pulling out some retail stuff, a lot of that overhead street string lights, things like that. Planters, that's all gonna be able to happen in the 16 to 24.
Sorry, can you zoom in a little bit? This isn't in our packet.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. And then we'll scroll to the right, and then we'll scroll down to each of those. Rooms changes pretty much both the north and the south to parallel parking and 2 travel lanes. And then also, this is the only option that has a dedicated uphill bike lane. So we're kind of throwing that out there as an idea. You do uphill only in a scenario where you can only do 1 bike lane. You do uphill because if you're like me and wildly out of shape, you are sucking wind on the way up. So you're going a lot slower on the way down, generally downhill, and you can keep up with most of this, okay? And then on our north-facing side, on buildings, say, outside of Sotheby's, et cetera, we're still getting an 8-foot cross-section, again, to keep very good pedestrian travel, still be able to punctuate that with planters, either above grade or in the ground, et cetera, either up against the building or out into that zone. I think that's it. So loading in this scenario becomes and several of these scenarios are kind of talking about this timed loading. So you can load and unload your major delivery trucks, your liquor, your food deliveries, et cetera, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And that was actually working really well before COVID. We can get into that later. And so we're pretty confident we can get back to that timed loading, and then it's just a matter of where is it located. So scroll just kind of to the right, James, and just very quickly I'll go through these just so you get this sense, okay? So here's parallel parking. Again, it's pulling out the angled parking. It's getting that parking now dedicated to the pedestrian experience. So both sides, here's your little bikers, woohoo! They're going uphill. Here's this guy, he's a biker. He's just in the travel lane for the 2 vehicles. So here you can kind of get that sense because you're going to see a big difference in these options. This sort of 16 to 24 foot parking on the side. You got a lot you can do in here. And so here's a room. We can designate that room with different things, different materials on the ground, different vertical things. We'll go to the next one. So linear was our next option.
Can I ask a quick question about the one you just showed?
Yes,
So the
please.
people on the south side of the street wouldn't really get that big sidewalk thing, they just get a little sliver?
So they get about 8 feet, yep.
They wouldn't really they wouldn't be able to activate it like the people on the other side of the
Not quite the
street
same,
would.
yeah. So I think that you still have some of that. So if you look, it's 8 feet of like the walkway, and they still have about another 6 feet. So right now, we don't have as much like spill out, right? So Tempranillo, big front yard, et cetera. But really, if you add this, there's still about 14 feet to the building face. So there is a lot of flexibility still to kind of play with, you know, this might be a little bench seating area, and so it can still be some spill out. So this is a little deceiving that's just 8 feet of the walkway. Does that make sense?
It makes a big difference when it's in front of Tempranillo and the bank, let's say, because they have so many like so much softscape
Right.
from the right of way to their building face. But then at the narrowest point,
Versus,
probably
like,
and
Sotheby's.
Core logos and the
Yep.
Sotheby's, those would be the ones that don't have as much spill out space, but we wanted to align the sidewalk all the way across instead of.
All right, linear. So linear tends to keep a lot of the scenario that's out there right now. Save removing center loading. So what's happening is center loading is being removed, and that's effectively being dedicated to this pedestrian experience on either side. So now this maintains, we actually turned it to angled parking the whole way. So, you know, some sides are head in, some is angled, and so it'd be kind of angled both ways. You gain a few spaces. So that scenario, you know, had some additional parking. And so even taking away the central loading, a lot of parking still. So for us, you still have a not recommended scenario. You know, normally Midland is still a pretty busy street. You are not wanting to back out into that street. And so we wanted to make sure this was on the table, but, you know, we're still not real happy to have angled parking and backing out into these scenarios, but here it is. And so biking would be just sharing the travel lane with the vehicles. And, you know, here you kind of get 7 total. So again, this is probably deceiving to make sure that we have that as 14. This says 7 total. This says around 13. It varies a little bit, maybe 13 to 15, but in general, it's a little more than just half of what you might have in the rooms. And then in this scenario, we see with some of that spill out, a la outdoor dining, our highest ranked we need to have, would probably be a little bit on the sidewalk and then doing kind of the parklets, so spilling out into some of those angled parking spaces, okay? So you still have that scenario, we still have a lot of room to play around, but it would kind of be, you know, in the parking spaces, which has its pros and cons. And then we can go scroll a little bit to the right. So again, you see just a bird's eye view of 2 travel lanes here, our angled parking on both sides. You'd have something where, say, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, you know, this entire section would be dedicated to loading, so timed loading zones. So you have big chunks of space that have to be taken up for that, which is okay. You know, we've definitely been looking at the patterns. You are not filling that street with employees until probably about 9 or 10 a.m. And then things like this, where you get a little bit of that outdoor dining, takes over some of these little angled parking spaces. And then again, bikes are just traveling in the lane. So here it is here, you know, looking at how 13 feet spill out into this space, so we can still do probably some raised planters, et cetera, trees, you know, in the paving. Those are all different options. We can go to the next one. So our last one is interesting in that it kind of plays around with the idea that you probably have some of the narrowest pedestrian space in a way, but yet you have this Woonerf idea, so you have maximum flexibility. So in cross-section, somewhat similar here in that we are parallel parking both sides of the street. So the distance that we saved from this scenario when you were doing angled parking is put back into the center as center loading. So a little bit of what's out there, but we make sure it functions much, much, much better. Still could have timed loading, et cetera, so then the trucks are not there all day long. This, similarly, 13, and you kind of have this 8. So if we go over here, you can kind of see where you have travel lanes, and this, similarly, no dedicated bike lane. We would not really have the space for that by the time we did the center loading in these 2 scenarios. And you know, this kind of has this travel lane, but you sort of think about how all of this would just kind of cross back and forth, right? We envision people just being able to circulate throughout. Some of this as loading, and then it might become bike corrals, right? There might even be a little bit of lighting through that center space, and then lighting on the sides, so you can kind of enliven this whole street, very unique, and circulate throughout. So those are kind of those 2. Okay, so I am going to effectively, you can just kind of scroll these, I guess, James. They're just a little bit bigger. This is rooms. Again, you can kind of see, you know, bike lane was in that. Yeah, rooms, and then linear. And this is just a zoom in of what we were just looking at. Ooh, nerf. Okay. So, as we said, this is so much to take in, so we wanted to make sure that we narrow this in to some of this, what we're calling the big moves, right? And that's all about the pedestrian experience, what kind of space do we want to dedicate to that? So I'm going to have you flip ahead one more slide, James. So here's our big questions. Big moves. What are we willing to, what kind of moves are we willing to take to achieve this vibrancy, the accessibility, the pedestrian environment, the experience? What do you guys see in sidewalk widths, outdoor dining, right? Parking strategies, what do you like, what don't you? If you said, this is what I would build tomorrow, what would that look like? Is there anything that you see here that's like, forget about it, you can't do that, there's no way, fatal flaw? What are some of the other critical success factors?
I think the linear plan is not that far different from what we have now.
It sure is not.
And we're you know, I think everyone is looking for the big stroke about what would make our downtown experience a better place. But both Rooms and Wooner do both of those things however, there's so many diverse inputs on this. I think at the end of the day, a combination of those two, because it seems like something you could put parts of in various places.
Totally.
Would work really well, but the one thing I like about the Woonerf is the drainage in the middle, because we have no subsurface drainage really. And so we could utilize that, because we have such a big drainage problem and ice problem on the sides, especially on the dark side of the street, you know, we could create a real structure in the center, and also we could create some sort of multimodal shallow utility thing there too, because a lot of our shallow utilities are things we couldn't even understand what they are now. You know, like, who would have thought about fiber 10 years ago? No one would have thought that was the thing. So there will again be something like that too. So, but having all that centered in the middle gives the opportunity for creating a space where things could really, really change. But I personally think both Woonerf and Rooms have you know, factors with them that everyone in Basalt would really kind of connect with in various ways. So there would be something for everybody, but by doing it that way, all one thing would get, you know, but we're just not that kind of town. You can't please everybody.
I have a couple comments.
Thoughts, comments?
I looked at this display when I was at Motors on Midland on Saturday, and found it utterly confusing. And just full of landscape architecture lingo, and I'm like, what the hell is a Woonerf? And you know, there's one woman there explaining things, and she was tied up with somebody else, and I was like, I can't even begin to figure this out. I guess I'll see it at some point at P&Z. But I think if we really want good public info, we need to simplify this whole thing so people can understand it at a glance, and not the lingo. Don't use Woonerf, just say what it is. Just, you know, make it simple. So people can really, you know, think about what they're looking at, rather than, I don't understand this term and I don't get what a room is, and because I didn't understand any of that. And I am pretty versed in architectural terms, but it didn't make any sense to me. So I would say really, really simplify it and just see if it can be in like one graphic. I don't see huge problems with the way downtown Basalt is right now, so I think more along the lines of tweaking things. I think we have gorgeous plants throughout. You know, I've always loved the flowers that are in front of Alpine Bank and in front of the little mall building and down the street. So, you know, I think subtle things like, you know, yeah, with hanging baskets, you know, smoothing out the sidewalks. But I don't know, I don't see the need for like a wholesale makeover. I think town is pretty charming the way it is. The downtown pedestrian part of it.
Thoughts, comments?
I'll go. First of all, thank you for pointing out the parking issue with the employees that park in front of their places of business, which drives me nuts. I grew up in the supermarket business. We parked in the far back corner of the supermarket so the clients could park right out in front. And you know, the school parking lots are empty all summer. It's a great place for them to park and walk across the swing bridge, and you're in town. And I don't know if you need to strictly enforce the 2-hour parking, or just have their bosses say, get your car out of the street and go put it at the school. So thank you for bringing that one up. I guess my question is, you know, we talked mostly about sidewalk width and parking orientation. And how much flexibility is there as you work your way down Midland? Can some sidewalks be wide in front of a restaurant, and then some be narrow in front of something else that needs angle parking, you know, if you're running in real quick? And then other places have parallel parking. One side of the street is angle, one side of the street the other side of the street is parallel. Like, is it all or nothing, or are we mixing and matching?
I mean, not necessarily. I think this is obviously, here's this kind of average and, you know, a generalized cross-section. Obviously, final design starts to respond to a lot of different uses. That said, and something like the rooms is really conducive, right, to kind of playing with that. I think that said, you have commercial space, and so you always want to make sure that you're not necessarily pigeonholing, like you're providing the maximum flexibility in that pedestrian experience for whatever to happen in that commercial space. So while you may have a bike shop in one particular building now, that could be a restaurant, right? And in a lot of ways, or that could be, who knows, like it could end up being an office, or, so it's just, there's a lot of things that I think you want to make sure you don't pigeonhole too much. But would it have like different nuances? Absolutely.
Well, I think that sort of adds some of the funkiness we're looking for, like that whole linear idea
Totally.
I don't think is what we have. I mean, and it's not what we want to have. So, you know, where things are varied a little bit, it's okay to be wide in one place and a little bit narrow someplace, and maybe a few spots are angle and the rest of them are parallel. So I was just wondering how much we can mix and match.
In terms of the parking, I do think you want to be careful you don't mix and match too much. And just because there's a kind of a safety and a traffic implication, if things are always different, like I'm on a bike and I'm about to go by 3 parallel parked cars, then I might be behind someone who's pulling out. Or I'm that person and I parked there. Like having a lot of different scenarios on a streetscape, you do want to be a little careful. So there's a uniformity to it to a certain extent,
Right,
from
we
a
don't want to
safety
get
perspective.
too uniform, I don't think.
Yeah.
You had one picture down here in the corner of the crosswalk, traffic calming, you know, that's a painted 3D that I've seen done before, and I think they're just spectacular. And I've tried to get one. Yeah, but so over by the elementary school, you know, School Street and Two Rivers. So kids to walk across that every morning, I just think would get them excited about getting towards the school. And, you know, as the cars are going by, the kids going to school, that is a traffic calming crosswalk. I think it was brilliant.
What exactly is it?
So scroll back up, James, to the innovation slide. And the engineers on the phone are gonna kill us that we still left this in here.
Bollards.
Well, I
They,
think
they like despise it, so it's that bottom right one. That's like just 3D painted.
just painted.
Makes it look like it's.
Oh, okay,
2D,
I get
yeah.
it,
It's
yeah,
floating.
yeah, uh-huh.
But that slows cars down, and I think it'd be fun to go across. So that kind of thinking, a little bit more creative, a little bit less vanilla, I think is what we're after. And then just finally, were there any businesses that you guys spoke to that objected? They could be at the next meeting?
Not so far, no.
No one said, okay, because they're the ones that are gonna be vocal.
Yeah, I mean, they know it's happening, and so now it's,
Oh,
They're
100%
resigned to
buy-in
it.
would be both shocking and probably a first.
yeah, I think you're gonna see various levels of buy-in, but
Okay.
yes.
Great, thanks.
Has the budget been thought about yet? I know you're still designing, but where we are, I mean, we've gone up 20-30% in the construction world in the last 7 months, and like, this is all great, but do we start from the VE side and work our way backwards a little more in the environment we're in?
Yeah, so, I'm not
I
sure.
can speak to that if you
Yeah,
want.
there you go. Thanks.
Hi, again, sorry to interrupt. This is Catherine again, the town engineer. So, that's kind of the beauty of the CMGC methodology that we're using. So as I mentioned earlier, we brought Stutzman Gerbaz on earlier in the project, and they're involved intimately in this design process. And so they've been already helping us work through some of the constructability and, you know, long lead times on various materials, things like that. They'll continue to do that. But they're also just initiating some conceptual cost estimating. So they're going to be providing conceptual cost estimates for each of these 3 alternatives. And before we're done with you all and move forward with a chosen alternative, we'll be presenting those cost estimates to you. So that will help inform our decision on how we move forward. And then additionally, they'll be providing estimates at the 30, 60, and 90% design level. So we'll have check-in points all along the way, and then ultimately there'll be a guaranteed max price to move forward with those guys if all rolls forward as planned into construction. So, you know, it's a volatile time in the market, and you know, no one has the crystal ball, but I think we've set ourselves up in a place where we've got these multiple check-in points, and hopefully we can stay as on top of it as we really can at this point.
Thank you. Other question, are we doing any type of study for what the recommended parking quantity is based on the activation of the park, what we want to see down here? I mean, are we trying to actually reduce parking? because some of these plans, you know, we are reducing it by 10%. I mean, Rob, your idea of using the school is great. I never even thought about that. So, I don't know, is that gonna be a driving force at all, or is it more the perception of just what we want downtown to look like?
Yeah, so we don't, the town doesn't have a, parking study, and the parking study is not a part of this. What, Mayor, Kane asked last week was that we just make sure we perhaps expand this parking count that's on that differentiator page that has like existing and proposed and the few options. That was really just where this project is touching. So it was Midland and Midland Spur. So he said, okay, at a minimum, let's just make sure we add 2 rivers from an existing. So we're gonna do that. And then at that point, I think our hope is that we still figure out some strategies where in that core, we're minimizing, like if we have to lose any, it's gonna be absolutely as minimal as possible. And then make that decision. Is that the right trade-off, right? To get some of these cool spaces outside and do the outdoor dining, like are we willing to lose 5%? So we've just kind of been asked to make it this big. I sort of said, we gotta draw a line somewhere so like we wouldn't necessarily put the elementary school into it. We did share a little bit of the discussion around, some things that need to happen to make that successful. Again, these would be outside the scope of this project, so we just want to be careful. And so that's where a lot of these big moves, we sort of said, what are the critical success factors to make them possible, right? So if it's like, 5%, we're gonna like genuinely make the elementary school a summer overflow parking space. What are the 5 things that the town might need to do to make sure that that's successful, right? And so those are things outside, but we want to make sure that we capture them now. So that's the best I can do right now. And again, I would say like to try to not get too stuck on how much parking are we losing yet, like kind of stay on like what do we want to make happen, and then we get as close to possible knowing that we've got to keep parking, knowing that we need successful businesses, like all of that. And then we'll try to get closer to those numbers.
Going against what you just said, sorry.
That's okay.
Have you outlined what it looks like when there's someone pulling a boat and then someone right next to it going the other way, pulling an RV from Route I, and the space that relates to, and like how much we want to act, like I guess protecting the street, because there is a lot of traffic to the Route I, and it's not just it's not just small cars and
Yeah,
going.
totally. Yeah, and so we have 3 different lane widths, like in our scenarios right now that we're playing with, and some also work a little differently. Like, for example, in rooms, if you have this lane width and then a bike lane, effectively that lane is, almost 17 feet, because you have this 11-foot lane and 5-foot, so 16 feet, and then it's 12 on the other side, right? So we have a couple different scenarios. We held 11 feet as like the minimum, and then they sort of change from there. But our threshold has been the fire department and public works, because they're basically pulling plow trucks with a wing up, and they're pulling your aerial equipment. Like, so if they're comfortable, guy with boat is gonna be able to get through.
One thing we haven't really talked about, I think would be kind of key to its ultimate success, is lighting. I know lighting, because it's dark here a lot of the year, and
Yeah.
especially there, in the winter. How we attack that for each scenario may be different, but I'm excited to get there when we do. But I think that is going to be a key discussion.
Gina, thoughts?
I'm sorry that I missed the first meeting. I probably lost some of the input that made you do what you did with these 3 alternatives. I don't see any design theme. This could be anything. It could be finished up with anything, and we really haven't said a hell of a lot about anything. And I'm concerned on do we have too many cooks in there trying to do different things? Are we placating the retailers because they're the ones that have done most of the moaning and saying you haven't helped us at all? Are we the whole restaurant game across the country has changed dramatically with outdoor restaurants, both in the cold weather and very definitely in the summer. All you gotta do is go around every place and you'll see a big outlet. I don't know what this is addressing. I don't know if someone were to say, well, what's it going to be? I don't have a clue. And if you're pushing or something because we've got a magic schedule that we've got to be through by June, I think that's a huge mistake. I think somebody, somehow, we have to go with what it is, and even if it means we better take another whole look at the traffic pattern, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of room in width, and I understand and respect that. But what would happen if that became a one-way street? And maybe you pull the other around the project that you're working on and made that street coming the other way. Maybe that might help the truck traffic. I don't know, but I just don't know what we're doing. A lot of parts of Basalt and parts of the community wants Basalt to be known for its artwork. They believe that art is a very crucial thing and that we have a beginning of it, but we haven't bridged over into something else. And a good example is down in Carbondale. They have a very strong art program, and it shows a lot, and it gets a lot of people on Friday nights, Monday nights, whatever the hell it is. Are we trying to placate the retailers at the expense of the restaurateurs? Or is there a way to mingle them both? And that also requires youth activity. What kind of makes it happen? What's that spark, that ho-hum? This is just wider streets and a few things. I don't mean to be quite so critical because I wasn't there, but I don't know what direction that you have been given or what you want to accept to move this forward into a realistic and something really fine that says, wow, did you see what they did in Basalt? This won't do it.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. So James, if you wanna go to, I think it's not quite the last slide, but close. So as Cindy mentioned, there's a lot happening here, so we've been trying, we're kinda trying to, yeah, there you go. We're trying to maybe get feedback from you guys on some of the very first big, bold moves we need to make. So it's not that, like, the design and some of the theming, that it's not on the table yet. This is just, if we came at you all at once, right, it becomes extremely overwhelming. So we've started to look at some of the technical aspects of what we want to do, right? Middle loading zone. How safe is it right now to back things out? But really, out of the master plan, the key theme was that our downtown needs an investment. We've watched a lot of money go into Willits, into the streets, into those outdoor dining spaces, private investment also into the buildings. When was the last time we put that significant investment into the historic downtown? We need the vibrancy. We need people to drive through and go, cute buildings, and look at what that little dining space is. Like, look at that little retailer. Oh my God, they have the cutest outdoor shoe display. Like, look at those bikes pulled out. I gotta stop here. Like, I can't drive through. I can't not stop here. And so that's what came out of the master plan, right? So in addition to these technical aspects, we've got to dig up the street, first of all. Ultimately, we're going to have to dig up the street. We've got to redo the sewer, the water, all the deep utilities, in addition to the shallow utilities. So you're going to make that kind of investment. And honestly, out of your, it's 11.2, 10.7 goes into stuff, right? The rest goes into soft. A ton of that is going to be underground. It's so unfortunate, but a whole bunch of that is going to be 100 years worth of infrastructure under the ground, right? Then you're going to have this investment on the surface, and then that's what everybody sees. And so we're going to be judged by that. So we're not trying to put theming aside, we just wanna make sure some of these big bold moves like,
So Heather, how can
We
we
just
help?
want it back
We've been
on
going
track.
at it a long time tonight. So,
yeah, no,
you know,
totally.
and we've been doing this, and I know you're trying to jam it all packed, and it's not quite as
So
in-depth as what we did last week. So I appreciate, what can we do now? Was the feedback you got enough? Is there specific things that we can help with in the next 5 or 10 minutes?
I think so. I mean, I think the big moves, right? Like, how comfortable are we with that loading would be looked at totally differently, that parking might be looked at totally differently? Like, is there something where there's kind of a no-go? And again, you know, I don't wanna like tuck away, but it's more like put a pin in the theme, cause we'll get there. We have a lot of this happening. But it's more, if we're here with a lot of options, you know,
'Cause
we've
I've
heard
been
a
thinking
lot
about,
so far.
for me, and I know Bill was there too, like, you know, I've been thinking about it for a week. And this idea of Woonor to me is extraordinary, but I don't know how it's applicable. But to Rob's point, like, the flexibility that the rooms brings, and we can have some of the funkiness depending on the different vendors, and then we get new vendors and they can do something different, you know, is pretty cool, you know, and to do that. I think I would echo Rob's point, the linear, we have it, we need to tweak that, to me, you know, so, but those little tweaks, the lighting, all these little things that are little touches that can make a huge difference. And then back to the comment where we started tonight, those things can actually make that even more vibrant too.
Lighting and stuff like that and music, that's not the essence.
No, I agree.
It's just,
But-
it's the finishing touches.
True.
that make it.
What do you think is
We're
the
in an
essence?
area now that there are changes that are being made, looked at. We have an aging group that's here that literally have no place to sit and congregate and watch people. And all it takes is a 10 by 10 patio with a little bit of sunscreen over the top of it. You get young people, not children, but certainly high school, junior high school, that always wants to do something after school. We messed it up badly on this new thing that he's under construction with, or somebody's under construction with. That's it, thank you. And there's nothing for the kids to do. There's just nothing. They can stop there. But they would like to go to have pizza or ice cream, or where can vendors pop into this thing? And I just feel that, and also, we're probably gonna have even more connected driving. I think it's rather successful, showing a level of success. I don't know who knows it, but whether it would be a continuum, and maybe that is also another artery that someone would think of. And these are just kinds of things that would make this, we don't want to be Carbondale, we don't sure as hell want to be Aspen. What do we want to be? This doesn't do it.
So Heather, is it fair to say the main driver of this to begin with is that we have to tear it up for the infrastructure?
I like what you said. Would you say it again?
The main driver?
Huh? No.
What did I
Right.
say?
Never mind, I'll catch it.
Okay. Is it fair to say, though? So that we have to do this infrastructure project, so while we're at it, provides an opportunity to do something with the downtown streetscape?
I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
the infrastructure, it has to be torn up regardless, right? We have to get stuff done because it's
I
aging.
think when the
and-
community said, you know, it's time to invest in Midland, it was that combination of, we have a very aging infrastructure and we
Okay.
had to invest in all the stuff that you kind of see above ground, so.
Okay, so
they
one
go
didn't
pretty
come
hand in
before the
hand.
other.
No, and I might
would
just
think so.
add that, you know, I guess we don't want to invest in our street level improvements and spend millions of dollars on that, knowing we have aging infrastructure that's, you know, just underneath it. So in 5 years, it would have to be torn up again to fix that aging infrastructure. So it's just, you know, thoughtful planning, long-term considerations of the fact that we don't want to make, you know, a poor investment in those street improvements, knowing that we have aging infrastructure underneath it all.
Okay, yeah, I
And on the
understand,
capital
that
needs
makes
committee, there
sense.
wasn't a chicken or an egg, it was
Yeah,
kind of an
okay.
organic kind
I
of
understand.
growth.
And then just to clarify, with the room things, does that make it more up to the individual merchant, what they're gonna do outside than some of the other ones would?
It could.
Okay. And is that really like, would it be a lot different from what they're doing now? It'd just be on like a nicer sidewalk or something?
I mean, not necessarily. It could be that we just create kind of a slate for each of those rooms, and it's a little more blank slate, and then they get to do some of their stuff. It could be that there are some areas where, you know, there's actual like intervention, there's something that is installed. So probably the idea with rooms is that it varies a bit.
Okay, I'm just still trying to wrap my head around that one.
Sure.
And one thing I might add to Gino's point with a bit of our aging community is you may be aware that downtown is really highly inaccessible when it comes to ADA considerations, and some of these alternatives would allow for a more fluid movement, you know, allowing for greater ease of ADA access. I mean, all of them, of course, would account for ADA access, but I guess that's a large consideration as we think about the pedestrian flow and pedestrian movement through these different spaces.
Can I ask one thing regarding the schedule?
Yeah, by all means.
When you come back in June or however that gets tweaked, it's gonna be us choosing one of these three, or there's a potential that these three are probably gonna get tweaked again based on the next month?
The latter, yeah.
Okay.
So we're looking, this input, council's input, survey input is gonna take this kind of big matrix, right, of a lot of differentiators, narrow in, so that there's like one idea, and it might just have a couple of options off of it, like, and you could do this and this, and start to have a lot more of that, the design theme, right, the true, what makes it so unique to Basalt, how does it tie to all these other spaces, you know, a lot more of the visual coming together with the
And the expectation is it's one presentation and a vote that, during that same meeting?
No, you have two more bites at the apple.
We got a little time.
It's a preliminary schedule in there, so it may be adjusted as we need to come back and review the plans again, or if there are more tweaks or whatnot, so.
Okay, this is the one that shows as we get one more shot at this, not two.
That's just that we're having a meeting, it doesn't say what we're voting on and when we're coming back. That's just the next little month or two window.
But also, Kyle,
Vote to recommend
I
preferred
think we'll have one
design.
more discussion,
I mean,
yeah.
no, because you're, I mean, some of the initial scheduling was that the next version would be, and we've all kind of said, we need some more bites at this apple. So our intention right now would be two more.
Okay, that's
It is
why I'm a
different.
little confused.
No.
It's different than what.
Catherine
we
and I
were-
literally just had a conversation
Gotcha.
at like 5 o'clock tonight,
Okay,
and she had a conversation with Michelle and all these guys, so we're kind of adding that in, seeing how complicated things really are to make some of these decisions, so.
okay.
You know, one just quick comment is, if you're looking at a scenario where you're keeping the loading lanes in the middle and then thinking about parking, Telluride allows parking in their loading lanes, so, you know, on it, maybe that's something to consider, like after 5 PM or something, or, you know.
So this Woon Earth design, that center lane would operate a lot like Telluride does.
Maybe it's a good time to mention that there'll be another opportunity to go through the plans and go through all of this Thursday night.
Yes, so we will be stationed at Business After Hours. And we'll be in Z Group space. Tables, a lot more information. So also, Let's Talk Basalt.basalt.net has the link to the survey. So the survey, there are a lot more like sheets on here, like design themes, imagery, right? Are we talking modern, Western? Do we want to stay in the traditional? It also looks at some options for Midland Spur, how to change some of the traffic circulations, you know, to your point, maybe not necessarily on all of Midland, but looking at it at least for the spur. And so there's a lot more information there that, again, you know, we knew we just could only get through X, you know, tonight. So let's talk Basalt, letstalk.basalt.net.
Cool. Thank you.
Somebody
good?
should put that up on the Basalt community Facebook page.
Yes, we're
It is, yes.
trafficking, yep, it's on ours, it's on that. It'll go to all the, committees. We'll email the chamber. We've got an ad in the paper.
Rob, would you?
Yeah, we just didn't talk a lot about trees, and I've made a note of it.
Great,
Trees down.
just trees everywhere.
No one ever says, that's a pretty street, but it has too many trees on it, you know?
It's very true. Yep, we're dodging
Flowered
utilities.
ones that smell really good now.
Wherever we're not dodging utilities, our hope is that we'll do trees. And that's where the raised planters in that scenario may help too, where even if there's utilities, we can do some.
Awesome.
Do you need a motion?
No, I think we're just taking feedback tonight in design, so I think we're
Yeah.
good.
Thank you
Thank you.
guys, I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Awesome. The next item then, just to keep us moving, is consideration of resolution number 4, series of 2022 on a C2 site plan amendment review for 144 Midland Avenue.
Yeah, thank you. Butch and Craig, do you guys want to please go up to the mic there? Yeah, we have the applicants with us here this evening. We've got Butch Darden that runs Butch's Lobster Shack, and we've got Craig, who is the property owner of 144 Midland. And I'll keep this brief in terms of the staff comments. This is a request to amend the site plan approvals to be able to put in artificial grass at 144 Midland, which is a historic property. It's the Kelly building that includes heirlooms. And the applicant received approval to redo the driveway area in there because they had issues with the driveway in terms of stability. There was also some sewer issues. So the applicants have been doing work over there with approvals from the town. And they received approval to put in real grass back where the grass was previously. And so they made a request actually to do artificial turf or the artificial grass, and you have the example there. Staff was a bit concerned from a character standpoint, given that it's a historic property. Do understand that there are some benefits to it, which would include, low water. You wouldn't have to water it at all. And that from a maintenance standpoint, it's probably decent. It wouldn't get trampled as bad as real grass. We do have some concerns about the stability of the product too. There might be some other alternatives that they could look at as well. Maybe a granite or rock scenario as well if they wanted to go low maintenance. But we wanted to bring it to P&Z to evaluate as part of the C2 site plan approval. You do have a resolution in your packet that if you approve the resolution would approve the ability to have the artificial grass. So this evening, staff would suggest hearing comments from the applicant and considering whether P&Z would like to approve the resolution that's in your packet or not. Craig and Butch, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm Craig Slater, I own the building, and just so you guys understand, this is a very small piece of grass. Does everybody know the building we're talking about? So you go in, there's a driveway.
Can we bring up an aerial?
Yeah, that would actually be very helpful.
I don't understand from the picture.
I'm more visual than, that would help us all.
Trying here, just a quick
Do you
second.
know where the umbrellas, those articulated umbrellas and the tables were
Yeah.
on that property? That's the grass we're talking about there. And also directly in front of where the deck ends. So there's like 5 tables.
And it's, so it's a very narrow area. On the right, there's an area to the right of the driveway, and then a very small area immediate left. Yeah.
There
So
we go.
Here we go. So,
So here's Midland Avenue right here. And you have the driveway going through the central portion of it. And then you had grass here in this area. You had grass here in this area.
that's not really to scale, Jim, I think.
This is Butch's kind of deck patio where most of the seating is.
The grass area is much smaller on the right, because the driveway is much bigger. But yeah, I think it's about 400 to 500 square feet of grass. And when I think of and there are tables here, the big issue is it's not grass, it's dirt. Because there's no way we can keep grass or any sort of structure. And I'm actually, as part of this, we're trying to do a new surface for the driveway. That was, if anybody knew it, was failing. And we're gonna do a nice aggregate, washed aggregate that'll be really nice. And if I don't do something, in my opinion, and our consultant's opinion, on the left or the right, it's gonna look like a big concrete area. It'll lose all of its charm. So more concrete doesn't strike me as aesthetically a good thing. You need something on either side. And grass is not a viable, when the Dardens owned it, before Butch was there, or sorry, with Darian's, before Butch Darden was there, it was nice, because nobody was there. Nobody was allowed on the property. But grass, in my opinion, is absolutely not an alternative, because I'll put nice sod in there. I'll do it if you guys tell me I have to. And then we'll do it in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whenever we do it. And by July 4th, it will be mud, because people, that's where the tables are. And so I thought in today's world, this is a great thing. I mean, I pulled up out of the Aspen Times in March, and you guys can look at this. But Colorado actually, out of their committee unanimously, the Agriculture, Livestock, and Water, is trying to pass a bill to pay you to take your grass out. And so we are in a huge drought. I mean, it strikes me that, you know, I'm not gonna solve the drought with what I'm doing, but, you know, when I walked here, I took a picture of, nobody can probably see it, but the Alpine Bank, all of the water going, as they water their yard, going right into the street. Going back to the river, so that's okay, but it goes through a lot of it's lost. So I'm trying to avoid, I do think it's the right message to be sending, to stop using natural grass. And then I'm in a unique situation because it just doesn't work with where I'm at. And then as the question of that grass, I'll do whatever you want. I mean, I want the best grass. Price is not the issue. I thought that was the best grass. If I put it in and it doesn't hold up, I'll put something else in, and it will look like real grass. So I'm not concerned about what I put in, because if it's, I'm saying in front of all of you, if it's wrong, it's just not a big piece. It's not like I'm asking for 10,000 square feet and it's some huge cost. So it's, grass of this type has gone a metamorphosis in the last 20 years. It's good stuff. And it feels like this is where the U.S. should be going. But anyways, that's my 10 cents on the whole thing.
Cool. Commissioner comments, Rob? Questions? I mean, not comments,
All
questions?
for it.
Kyle?
We should encourage it, we should see more of it.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand how we even can tell someone what they can't do that with grass or not, so.
Just questions right now.
Sorry,
Come back
yeah,
to conversation.
No questions.
Questions?
Sorry.
Questions?
No question.
Questions, questions? Question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, what the hell your drawing shows up there? Is the main street running on the right-hand side?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the building to the east is there,
That's where heirlooms.
That's heirlooms.
are.
and the building on the north, there, right there.
That's the Midland Mall.
That's the basic eatery, if you would, or you order from there.
No, that's,
And
That's where it says
is the-
areas
is the-
proposed, that's where the restaurant
That's
is.
the shopping?
that's the lobster shack.
This is the Lobster Shack right here. Do you know Lobster Shack?
Because that concrete drive runs all the way back, right?
Concrete Drive goes right
So
here.
there's no grass underneath where all your seating is.
correct?
On that side, yeah.
Pardon me?
Exactly. By the lobster shack, there's no grass. It's a wooden deck.
There's a wooden deck
Other
right here,
side,
Gino.
okay.
That highlighted blue
Wooden
thing.
deck has replaced any surface, so that the grass you're proposing is the little square.
Circle, yeah, with a little square and the, I'm not sure what you would call that.
We're not expanding anything. The look will be the same as it
Yeah.
always was. We're not
Okay,
changing anything.
James, did you say also someplace in your write-up that if this does not look good, or if it deteriorates or it's not kept up, we can ask them to change it, and they've agreed to that?
No, it's a draft condition in the resolution that you're considering, so you could get comments from the applicant as to whether.
I'm just giving, I mean, right now, you're looking at mud all season long. And I'm just telling you, I didn't think that was appropriate. I'm doing a grass. If that one doesn't hold up, it's not in my best interest to have a crappy looking building. And I'm spending a lot of money on it. I think I've done I like to own nice things, and I'm not asking for any help with this. And this is what, I wait a few months, I might get it. But it's like anything on a building. When it wears out, I'll replace it. Some people do, some people don't, and that's just life. But I'm just telling you, you won't walk on that and have it in bad shape.
Also, in that, James's, whatever you drew up, it says that we have to keep it up in
It does.
good condition.
Right.
So you have the power to say, keep it up.
Gino, any more questions?
Yeah.
I have one question. Would you be opposed to an additional, God forbid, when the lobster shack goes away, would you be opposed to putting a resolution saying that you'll naturally landscape it or something? Because I'm not sure we want artificial turf when the day comes that we don't want artificial turf. I mean, I'm hoping that's 20 years down the road,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I know. It's, I mean, it's an easy give for me because it's a long time, but I don't quite understand.
It's just that, we don't end up with artificial turf in 20 years when it's no longer a lobster shack, that it looks more natural,
Looks like Mrs. Darian's lawn.
Yeah, at your request, I would do it. I don't want something in there where it automatically have butch leaves, because
Yeah.
likely,
That's fair.
Butch and I are getting a little long in the tooth, so there will be, just a fact.
Fair enough.
So
10 years.
there will be somebody else in there,
Question?
likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Can
have
we
one more question.
just change, from it specifically saying sod on the TRC, where that's the adjustment, it's sod or, whatever the technical name of this would be? So that way the owner has the decision?
Let me look at what
Yeah,
you're referring to here, sorry.
It's page,
Go ahead. This isn't coming back to us, is it? First
I
and
don't think
second.
Well, unless we-
the original TRC says replace the old grass that was removed with new sod.
Yeah.
Could the adjustment be with new sod or turf?
Kyle, sorry, what page are you on this? I'm just trying to
In
get up to speed.
Packet, it's page 230.
Oh, sorry, okay, I was looking at the resolution, okay, sorry.
We can do that, but you would have to approve the P and Z resolution to do that.
I guess, so my question is, how do we adjust the resolution that's put in front of us?
You just can suggest amendments as part of your motion on
Amend it.
the
Okay.
resolution, yeah.
Yeah, because the TRC thing's different, that's,
That's
it's
something that's
referencing
already
the-
been approved by the town staff, and so this resolution would basically amend that if you
if we
approve
do
it.
that. Question?
Yeah, and have you reviewed this? You say you've looked into it a lot. That long strip there, which would be east of the driveway, has a lot of tables and chairs on it. And you're gonna have food and junk dropping down, mustard included, onto the, how, can it be cleaned?
Yes,
readily?
yes, yeah, you put it in a permeable, underneath is semi-permeable, and you can wash it. That's the whole benefit of it. Initially, 20 years ago, this stuff would stink, but you know, things, maybe 30 years ago, I don't know, but things have changed dramatically. That you can,
Done, thank you.
If you hold that piece of AstroTurf up to the light, you can see holes through it. So it allows water to go through. And so we could pressure wash it.
Cool.
and for the customer experience, we'll want to do that. I mean, it's all part of why we're fixing it up, because it was getting a little run down over there.
Cool. If no more questions, we will open it up for public comment, as this is a public hearing at 8:53. I see no one in the room. We won't open it to the room, but James, you want to give the online instructions just in case?
Yeah. For those that would like to provide comment and join the meeting, you could look on the second page of the P&Z packet and call in at 669-900-6833. And you need to enter webinar ID 836-0597-0900.
We will give that 30 seconds, see if anybody responds in. Close the public comments at 8:54 then, and then open up for commissioner comments. Instead of going around, just if you have any comments to make.
I like how realistic it looks, that there are even some little brown spots.
Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, I generally don't like fake stuff, but this is such a small area that, I trust these guys and want it to look nice because it's their businesses and stuff.
So, as staff proposed, we have two possibilities. One is, per staff, to reject it, or the second is they've given us a resolution to approve it. So.
Can you read the resolution to approve?
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to.
Resolution.
Yeah, I can read it.
It's like two pages.
That's what sorry.
Right.
Yes, if you can read it.
You want me to read it?
Oh, is it? Oh, I thought it was just.
No, it's 3 pages. It's got recitals, it's got conclusions and conditions.
I think maybe what you're looking for, the first two items in the resolution, which is that the applicant is applied to install artificial grass, to replace natural grass on a historically designated property. The applicant received approval pursuant to TRC Certificate Number 7, Series of 2022, to remove and replace the driveway, and to remove and replace the existing grass at 144 Midland Avenue with natural grass. Subsequently, the applicant has made a request to replace the natural grass with artificial grass. And it goes on to approve replacing the natural grass with artificial grass.
Bob, do you want to look at it?
No, I mean, I'm willing to make a motion to approve. I just didn't know if we wanted to amend it in any way, shape, or form.
Did he make a motion?
Sort of, not quite.
I'm willing to, does anybody have any amendments? Do we want to?
The only one was the one I threw out, if we want to have a condition later on, or we cross that bridge later on.
Turf should be kept in good working condition or
Well, that's
replaced
in
with
there,
sod?
that's kind of in there.
It's in there already.
Just to make sure, the way this is written doesn't say that it stops someone in the future from going back to grass now, does it?
No.
No.
We're sure that's not how that's, okay.
No.
Well, then I'll just leave it as is, so that
Okay.
way.
Motion to approve as written by staff.
We have a first from Rob, a second from Bill. All in favor? Aye. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll make it look nice.
Hopefully. Appreciate that.
Not hopefully, we will.
We will. Be even better.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank
James,
you.
thank
Jim
you.
here was very helpful.
Good job, Rob.
All right, we've been here a long time, but the last item on the agenda is commissioner comments, staff updates, comments, updates.
Oh, sure. Okay. I will make my updates quick. Let's see. Midland, Motors on Midland happened this week. I think a lot of you were attended. That was wildly successful. You have participated in the beginning of the Midland Ave Streetscape project. My question for you as a committee, commission, would you like to see the plan that comes back directly to you, or would you like to participate in reviewing that again in a work session with town council? You don't have to make that decision now, but if you have a strong feeling, you're welcome to.
I think
Streetscape plan?
Town council really wants to meet with us again. That's what Bill Kane said to me last time we met. That if we can get together on a joint work session would be a good thing.
Okay. We can also do both. If you feel like you'd like it to come back here and have your conversation here and then go back to town council.
I've not found our meetings with council particularly productive, given the time restraints, the number of people in the room. So I would maybe suggest it comes back to us and then we get to them with a little tighter plan.
I can't say it felt like a lot of talking last time, and then Bill talked, and then we had to go. No offense to Bill, it was, and that's his prerogative, it just didn't seem like there was a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, I agree with Rob, because it feels like there's still a lot to talk through on this.
Okay, great. So I'm hearing that we'll come back to P and Z. That's fine. Prior to it, yes. Okay, and that will look probably like June 21st. I think that's later than what's in the packet, because I think the team's gonna need time to make appropriate adjustments. The last little note I have for you is the solar project is moving along, and that the Roaring Fork School District is being very cooperative and trying to help us find sites, because most of them are on their property right now, so. Those are, oh, and we hired a new staff planner, so our department is full.
Yay.
Right now. His name is Alex Sloan, and he is super enthusiastic, and we're very excited.
Where's he coming from?
He's from Carbondale originally, and he just graduated college.
Oh, good.
So he's come home.
Yes, Gino?
I have a question. It's kind of a personal nature, but I think I should ask. I had planned to resign on the 1st of June. As I told you last year that, well, you were there. And with the information that we got to do for Tim on this 12th round here, and particularly the vision for the thing coming up in late June, I would like to stay until the end of June.
Okay.
And the second question is, do you have a replacement to keep the quorum?
We'd be looking for 2 people then, right? Because
Gino, we've had no one to replace you that I'm aware of, so
Say again?
we have no one lined up to replace you, so your resignation is when you decide, I think.
Well, no, I don't want to leave. I have a lot of respect for you guys. I don't want to leave it in a short.
I don't want to speak for everybody else, but you've been in the middle of all this. If you want to stay for another month or 2 months, we'd love to have you.
I have no idea what that side of the table said. Just absolutely no idea, and it's just so frustrating to me that I'm wasting your time. So if that's okay with you, I'll plan to stay till the 21st. Thank you.
Absolutely.
How the applications coming in?
Slowly.
Check today.
Not at all.
have we made a call for replacement members, or do people know to apply?
We've been advertising, but you are encouraged to encourage people to apply.
Okay.
So, yeah, so maybe.
Yes, she jumped onto Post.
Oh, gotcha.
Who did?
Sarah
Who's Sarah?
Shaw?
Which Sarah Shaw? Your neighbor?
My neighbor went onto Post. She was at one point interested in P&Z.
Oh,
And
okay.
she would have been a great.
Yeah.
I had mentioned last time, have you been able to put it out maybe in Spanish, or
I'm working on that.
that'd be great.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that'd be a good addition if we can find a Hispanic speaker or Hispanic person.
I thought that, was that Jimbo?
Yeah.
Store?
Yeah.
Gonzo? Yeah.
No, Gonzo.
Well, Gonzo, but he owns Jimbo's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Jimbo's, I thought he seems pretty bright. and
What's
interested.
Enthusiastic, yeah. I've just on the electrical vehicle front high school, we got a grant, so we're putting in a charging station probably by beginning to middle of June
For
for
public
electric
use.
vehicles. Yeah, for public, anybody can use it.
Kids, teachers,
Yeah, yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah, so we're excited about that. So, yeah. If no other questions, announcements, anything else, a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Bill first, Gino second, all in favor? Aye. Good work tonight.
I loved what
3
you
hours?
said. You started out and you first said,